different technology in place this evening, but it's been tested and I'm sure it'll work out fine. We'll just have to be patient. And also for those who didn't see the full agenda or understand what we were doing previously, we typically start in a very timely fashion, but we had a walkthrough through one of the properties beforehand, and it's never easy to time those things exactly, so we're running a little bit late. I apologize for that, but we appreciate it. We think it was time well spent. So. And
Chairman, because we are being televised, would you ring the bell so we signal to
Yes.
our video staff?
All right. So again, good evening and welcome to this June 3rd meeting of the Lake Forest Historic Preservation Commission. The Commission was formed in 1998 to provide a more rigorous, open, and principally driven process to guide and protect the development and redevelopment of historically significant properties and open spaces throughout Lake Forest. Properties that are located within a local historic district and properties that are designated as local landmarks fall under the purview of this commission, and we are bound to evaluate each petition against 17 standards that are outlined in the Lake Forest Code of Ordinances. Historic Preservation Commission, along with city staff, are here this evening to ensure that all interests and concerns of property owners, neighbors, architects, historians, and the community at large are heard and considered. City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and democratic meetings, and in order to achieve this goal, meeting procedures have been adopted by the Commission and are available on the city's website as well as the back of the room with each agenda. The ultimate goal of this commission is to work in collaboration with city staff and the entire community to preserve the unique and widely recognized historic nature of Lake Forest. While we constantly strive to move each petition forward as efficiently and expeditiously as possible, that objective will always be balanced against the obligation of each commission member to honor and uphold the traditions, standards, and guidelines that have guided this community for many decades. And with that, we will do introductions, and now I can do it live rather on Zoom where I have to half point and put up hands and so forth. So Jen, you want to start us off?
Jennifer Baird, planner with the City of Lake Forest.
Kathy Cerniak, Director of Community Development.
Robin Pettit.
Elizabeth Sperry.
Steve LaMontagne.
Bruce Grieve.
Jan Gibson. Maureen Grinnell.
Is Ron able to?
There's a delay for our last.
Ron, would you like to introduce yourself? Commissioner Levitsky.
Thank you. Ron Levitsky.
Wonderful. Thank you. So with that, the first item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes of the February 24, 2021 meeting. And I would ask if anybody had any corrections, suggestions, corrections, anything? No? All right. Commissioner Levitsky, anything?
No, thank you.
All right, wonderful. So a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. Next on the list this evening is consideration of a request for approval of a certificate of appropriateness approving the construction of a detached three-car garage, single-story addition at the front of the residence and various exterior alterations. This property is located at 420 Washington Road. And I would ask before we begin whether or not there are any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts. Hearing none. Commissioner Levitsky?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much. All right, with that, we invite the petitioners. Make a presentation. Welcome. Thank you.
Chairman Grieve, other members, and your other member in a safe, secure satellite location. We appreciate the opportunity to present our project. Hi, I'm Eric, and along with Deborah are the owners of 420 Washington Road. A bit of backstory on our passion for this property. When the Allen Brown estate came up for sale around October 2018, we toured the home at 410. However, we kept looking at its neighboring White House, asking if we could see it. Understandably, due to its deteriorated state, that was off the table. It was being marketed as land. Months went by as we continued our search around Lake Forest, but kept asking about 420. We were never naive to the amount of work that was in front of us. This is not an easy project to take on. The house has not been lived in for decades, so you can imagine the bad state it's in, and that's saying it nicely. Most would look at the house as a tear down. We have some fantastic stories that has led us to make our offer in March 2019. but we ultimately lost out. But the story wasn't quite over. So here we are, and maybe the story goes, the house actually selected us in the end. From our first conversations, we began exploring many different options for the home. We reviewed the shallow ravines and water patterns and felt with the proper restoration and water remediation, leaving the house built into nature as intended was doable. From there, we were able to explore the historic architecture, dive through personal documents at the History Center about the Ailing family, and meet more of our Brownsville neighbors. The shared private drive, traffic patterns, openness of visual space, historical architecture, and nature all became very important discussions. Each home in Brownsville has a unique site plan, and we want to continue this tradition. In order to expand the home slightly, we are proposing a one-story entry addition to the front of our house to allow for a proper-sized foyer, closet, and powder room. The house as it stands now is lacking a proper garage for today's standards. Mr. Ailing's incorporation of the garage into the home was brilliant and ahead of its time. Our garage will be positioned towards the house, creating a courtyard atmosphere and showcasing it from the house. It also nestled among the mature trees as if it has been there for the entire time. We are proposing an A12 roof pitch on the entry addition consistent with the house and similar to our neighbors at 430. For the garage, we will follow the same roof pitch of A12. The dormers will have a 312 pitch, which is the same as the south elevation bump out. Here's a quick sketch of how it will look. The garage scale respects the current home and also feels very natural to our Brownsville neighbors as you pull up our private drive. Let me walk you through our elevations to discuss some of the other adjustments we have made. We want to honor Mr. Ailing's original garage, emulating the look of a carriage store at the lower level, so his garage will always be remembered. We're not able to salvage the home's current windows. They have been through many freeze and frost cycles without any temperature control. Also, taking advantage of today's thermoplane windows will enhance the house's long-term energy efficiency. When possible, we are mimicking the original double casement windows. However, since they have a stationary center frame, they do not meet egress. So we've come up with a few alternatives for safety, as well as the revised floor plan. As you can see here, the attic windows are a single casement to meet egress. There also was a door here, which for safety we felt better to remove. So we are using another window meeting egress. The windows in home will be white, so although the styles differ slightly, the windows will blend in since the color palette is tone on tone. We were graciously given a set of historical plans from our neighbor, Mr. Stephen Douglas, at 460 Washington Road, a twin-like house to ours and also built by Mr. Ailing. As you can see, Mr. Ailing was not afraid to use different grid patterns when needed. Now, we are not comparing apples to apples, but as you can see here, these windows have a more square pattern, and these are more rectangular. And actually, the original basement windows are a 3-light scenario, another different pattern. Here's our west elevation. In the attic, we have an egress window. What also might stand out to you are the windows in our family room. We really want to highlight the garage and admire what this site has become and follow the scale of the door that originally enters this room. On the historical plans at 460, the grid scale on the predominant door was much larger, creating an impact or moment. With our family room, we are trying to create this same function, flooding the room with natural light and creating the view from all sides of this room. Although we are trying to interpret what this historical home should become, and interpretation is always subjective, we are hoping Mr. Ailing might feel that we have bridged the historical significance with inspired new elements in a thoughtful way. We poured through documents at the History Center, hoping that we might find the historical plans to our home, gain inspiration from photos or some type of sign or direction. But we actually found the sign we were looking for at the home. We were contending with water damage leaking through a vent in the master room. I had to pull back the built-in, and there, totally preserved, was a piece of wood, signed by the carpenters that built the house in 1924. We think Mr. Allen wanted us to find the soul of this house, if you believe in that sort of thing. We do. This piece of wood will be put back into the home, next to our piece of wood signed by Deborah and I, with a special note that hopefully someone else will find it 100 years from now. Our interpretation of this home might not be 100% authentic to what it was, but we believe this house is not about ornamental details or grand structure. It's a simple cottage for enjoyment. This historical renovation is more about the soul of the house and bringing it back to life. We thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it. Jennifer?
Right. Thank you, Chairman. So this petition includes the request for a single-story addition on the front of the existing home and a new 3-car garage and other various exterior alterations on the existing residence. This property is accessed by a private drive that is located off of Washington Road that is shared by a total of 4 homes, and so this residence being set back from the street is not easily visible from Washington Road. The property is about 23,000 square feet and is also considered a lot in depth because the property does not have any street frontage. The site is also bordered to the east and south by a shallow ravine. The residence on the property was built in the early 1900s and features simple forms and simple roof lines with some craftsman-style architectural detailing. The Commission considered a different petition for this same property back in October 2019, and that petition was presented by the contract purchaser at that time, but that project did not end up moving forward. The current owners purchased the property in November 2019 and came forward with plans last year for the garage as well as a 2-story addition on the south side of the home. Those previous plans were presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals last October because the 2-story addition encroached into the setback and required a zoning variance. The zoning board at that time directed the petitioner to consider other locations for the 2-story addition to minimize the extent of the variance that was being requested. And so in response to the zoning board's direction and after much study, the petitioner revised the plans to eliminate the 2-story addition entirely, and instead a smaller single-story addition is now proposed. The plans that are before the commission tonight were recently considered and recommended for approval by the zoning board to allow a small portion of the front addition and the eave of the garage on the west side to encroach into the setback areas. The proposed single-story addition on the front of the home is intended to expand the entryway and to make a more functional entry point into the home. The addition is pretty small in size relative to the overall size of the home and totals an area of only about 140 square feet. The existing garage is located in the basement of the home and can only accommodate a single vehicle. So the petitioner is proposing a 3-car garage on the west side of the property, and the existing garage in the basement will be converted to finished basement space. The front of the garage faces west toward the existing residence, with the shorter side elevation facing north, which minimizes the appearance of mass as viewed from the shared private drive. The garage is a 1.5-story structure. The first floor of the garage has 3 bays, and the second floor has an office space. And instead of a full second story above the garage, a shed dormer is proposed on the east elevation to provide the necessary headroom for the interior space while keeping the mass and the height of the garage subordinate to the main home. The petitioner is also proposing some exterior alterations to the existing residence, which includes removal of the existing shutters and window and door replacement. Most of the replacement windows present proportions that are consistent with the existing double casement windows on the home, although, as the petitioner stated, there are some replacement windows that reflect different sizes and proportions, and so staff recommends that the replacement windows around the home more closely follow the original vertical narrow proportions of the double casement windows to the extent possible while still meeting building code. The work that is proposed does not require removal of any trees on the site. The petitioner did provide a conceptual landscape plan that reflects extensive landscaping across the property with a number of new evergreen trees and ornamental and understory plantings. And overall, staff finds that the petition meets the commission standards, and the proposed additions and restoration of the residence will preserve and enhance a structure that might otherwise have been targeted for demolition. So there is a recommendation for approval in the staff report, along with findings in support of the petition, as well as a few recommended conditions that are outlined further in the staff report.
Great.
Those are
Jennifer.
my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we go to questions now, if anybody has for clarification. Jan, you want to start us off? Commissioner Gibson?
Yes. Welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you. We're happy to have you here. First, I wondered if you two were from Florida, because when I saw we've obviously seen this structure 3 times, I think, over the period of years, and we're so happy you're here. And I wondered if you were from Florida, and I'm just kidding on this, because there was a door on the west side of your house, and there's no door on the east side of the garage. And I thought, I wonder if they know what our winters are like. You're fairly close to the lake, and that courtyard experience that you want will be wonderful. But I would always be looking for the fastest way to go from house to garage. So it looked like you were going to have to go out the front door and around to the north side of the garage, or out the back door and then around to get there. So I just wondered if you had thought about logistics on that, or putting in a door or something. Or
We did. You know, we actually really looked at a West Side edition, which I think was presented before. And we, with the floor plan that we want, we want that family room right off our kitchen. He's a bigger guy. We need the room, and having doors coming in that room is hard, to really try to place a TV, enjoy it with family. His brother's bigger than him. His father's the same size. My dad's 6'3". I mean, 4 of them in a room, having doors doesn't work. So we're trying to do our landscape plan to try to help us kind of like work.
Mrs. Kirsch, could you just speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, sure. So we're just trying to work a little bit around that to allow our floor plan to function better for us, where we'll be coming in the back door and in the front door. It's going to be a very casual house.
okay, well, you could always use the remote from the kitchen, to the garage door and just run out. Anyway,
will be doing that.
but I think it's a lovely renovation and so forth, and boy, is it needed. Second, and my colleagues are going to roll their eyes when I mention this, because I always do when I see a seamed metal roof over about a 4/12 pitch, because it's very noticeable. And a 3/12 pitch, you don't see it as much, so I think on the garage it's great. But I always think of chicken coops and Key West cigar houses and other buildings with that metal seam roof. And this one, on your front, which I think the front addition is wonderful, is going to be so noticeable as you drive in. And I just wondered if you might consider using the same texture that you're using in the house on that particular one. I know you want to match things, but and maybe other people are so used to this, and I'm sure I'm going to have people talk about this in terms of against what I'm saying, but still, I really noticed that on a house that is of that vintage, I guess. The window, I agree with the staff on the windows, and I wanted to know if, since you read this, have you considered changing any of the windows so they might be a little more vertical and narrow?
We definitely feel
At
like
all.
there's room to tweak the windows a bit. Him and the egress window and getting out some of the attic windows, there's actually access to the roof where he'll get on the roof, clean the gutters.
Right,
The 25-inch egress window, he doesn't fit through well.
got it.
So, but I think, we could try to scale them to make it look more vertical.
Well, I was going to say the basement windows. Now, Granted, the Allings had all kinds of windows, all right? So what you're doing is an improvement, certainly. But I just wondered if on some of them, you might be able to make them a little more consistent. And some of my colleagues might mention something with that too. Can you explain the deck? I know one of the letters that came in questioned the deck and the depth, I guess, the length to the edge of the ravine. And can you explain the structure of that, how it's done, how you've designed it?
Well, we're stopping prior to that south wall that's been there for, I guess, 94 years now. There's some work that needs to be done, which we had explained we would rectify the issue with that. It wasn't a lot of work, and we wanted to keep it away from that, so we left a little planting area, so we backed it off about 34 inches, I believe. 36? It is 36. And from our understanding is, as long as we keep it within 8 inches of what's ground level now, it would be okay, and that's what we're doing.
Okay.
I think, you know, we did not get the addition we wanted off the back, so we actually, after going through the process and over and over and over, we felt that it would actually work out better that we would have a little deck in the back, a grilling area, somewhere to sit down. I mean, you have the look of the ravine going east. So we just try to conform it to the, you know, a decent size that wouldn't offend the area, I guess you could say, and overdo anything. Again, it's going to be, you know, 8 inches or less off of the ground.
Are you using womanized lumber? What kind
We're
of?
going to use wood.
Okay.
And womanized, of course, yes.
Okay. And you're anchoring it to the house in what method? I saw some sketches.
Yeah, we are going to use some piers. We would need to use piers, and I would assume that they would have to be, you know, 43 inches or 45, depending on, you know. And we are going to, you know, put an apron against the house, which will hold, you know, usually that engineering. Of course, we are working with Mike Black Engineering. I guess it would be Black Engineering, but Ken, who's an engineer there, we had asked him to maybe look into how much reinforcement we could do against the house because of the length of the house being, you know, coming off, I think, 12.4. At a certain point, you have to have a pier because, you know, it's such a length. So we're going to do what the standard would cause us to do.
Okay, all
And
right.
stick with it.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Great, thanks very much. Commissioner Levitsky, any questions?
Yes, thank you. It seems that you have a lot of building on the house. You got the deck on the back. You got your small addition. Obviously, the garage as well. The flagstones. Are you concerned at all? You mentioned Mr. Black. Is there any questions dealing with the, you know, impermeable or permeability of the area? And I mean, you're not going to have much grass, are you?
No, we're not going to have much grass. And, you know, I think it's super important that we have a garage. And what we were trying to do with the space, obviously, in between the garage and the house is to be able to pull in a car into a garage. Other than that, the lot is just not very large. There's easements for sewer and electric, I believe, going due northwest, and that's you know, that area of north of our private drive is kind of our only grass area, and we were going to try to also reclaim some of that tableland that has been overgrown on the east side, just south of the private drive, and put some more sod there.
Thank you. And a second question, in your petition, you said that the house had been unoccupied for over 30 years. Jen in her report said over 10 years. Either way, it's a long time. And you mentioned that you had to replace the windows. As you've gone through the house, you know, how much of the house can you basically save, and how much do you need to restore or use new materials?
So we're gonna have to go to the bones. Everything needs to be replaced, all electric, all, sewer, water, gas lines, pretty much everything but the lumber. Start from scratch. But it's got, its base, its foundation, it still has its soul. So,
Great, thanks so much. That's all I have.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Grinnell?
I had a couple questions regarding the garage. I understand that there's a door on the north elevation and a door on the south elevation that would be for, passenger entry, not car. How would you get into the house? What is your planned access into your house in terms of kind of borrowing on or building on Jan's question, the way of getting into your home and not having it be a great distance?
so again, we originally were looking to do that addition on the south side, which would give us that mudroom.
Right,
So we have to find a way to get into the house and have somewhat of a mudroom. So our entry now would be through the front door, which would
Okay.
be less formal of an entry. There's a bathroom there that,
Okay.
as well, and that is our mudroom, I guess, per se. It's, also a foyer
Sure.
at the same time.
Okay.
It's gonna be a combination of,
and do you have any idea about how many feet that would be, the distance that you need to travel between the garage and the
who's
front door?
parking? Me, I've got the longest one, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
the last door, I'd say about 75 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, that was my only question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pettit? Questions?
Congratulations on, I think, a very nice project. I, as well as others that have mentioned it, found some of the differential window spacing a little bit problematic, but understandable. And I think your research paid off. It's a wonderful project, and I commend you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Sperry, questions?
Wow, such a labor of love. Thank you for taking this on. This is epic. We really appreciate this. It's such a wonderful house, isn't it? That whole enclave is just right out
Love
of the
it.
storybook. A couple of questions. First of all, what is the composite material you're using? Is that a pea gravel, or what's in the center there?
It's a chip seal.
Great. And then could you bring up the western elevation for us, please? Of the house. There, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna echo Commissioners Gibson and Pettit that it just kind of makes sense from a flow standpoint that there be a door here for your sake and sanity. I just don't see you guys doing the flowing inverted U every time you need to get groceries or get in and out, especially when we have a couple feet of snow. So just something to think about. The deck. Can you give us the dimensions of the deck off the back, just roughly, so we have an idea of that size and scope?
Roughly 14.2 by 22,
No, it turns out to be 18 by 20. 'Cause that
18 by 20.
And there's is there a steep drop off there? So you said it's gonna be up on stilts, for lack of a better word? Or is it
No,
straight?
it would be one step. So, yeah, so once you come off the deck going to the garage, because you can't go the other way, we're actually going to take those stairs out because that was a kind of a big water issue. But it's one step off of going west, off of the deck.
Right.
And we're going to kind of widen it a little bit so it's a soft walk.
So you're really not in the ravine yet, then? Is
No.
what you're saying. That's just basically your backyard and you're decking it from the
Correct.
normal living space.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Lamentine?
Thank you. So a couple questions. I'm trying to understand the door on the west elevation, so the recommendation. The trek to the driveway is off of the south, you'd use the door in the back of the house on the south elevation?
You could, to go into the kitchen. Most likely, you're going to be coming around the front because the development is more, the mudroom will be towards the front of the house to drop your shoes, clothes. We did look at putting our entry off the west and actually changing the whole positioning of how you came in the house. But then you kind of moved away from your front elevation being your main entry. And we pulled back on that.
Yep.
We also thought about putting a door in where the air conditioning units, because originally those were on the other side, but then we had to kind of flip-flop to try to bring our air conditioning units more internal. So we lost that opportunity there to have a door to maybe shoot through to the kitchen.
Right.
You know, we thought about changing our entry even like through the living room and making it very informal. We've kind of gone back and forth a lot on it ourselves.
Yeah. So can you just go to the south elevation for a second, please?
Sure. So there's myself.
Yeah, I guess I just envisioned that your guests would be using the front door, but if you're lumping groceries in, you'd be using this door on the south elevation, which is
Well, yeah,
probably
you could
20
for
feet off
sure.
of the west elevation,
Yeah,
right?
you definitely could. If you want to come and hang your coat and do all that other stuff, you might come around the front.
Yeah, okay. Just a question on the attic windows. And I agree with Commissioner Gibson that, you know, maybe look at the consistency of those windows, let in as much light as you possibly can up there, maybe with the double casements. But the window that's on the, I guess it's the, I'm losing my track here. The east elevation. Where does it look to? Because it looks like you've got a pass, almost a racetrack in the attic, if I look at the attic layout.
This window here that I'm pointing to,
Yes.
that looks out to the ravine area on the inside. Is that what you're?
Yep, so that's the bedroom area in the attic plan. So, I'm sorry, the opposite side, the west elevation. You're proposing to replace the window with an egress window, but I'm wondering, when I look at the floor plan, what does it go to? I don't see it on the west elevation, on the attic floor plan.
I'm
Sorry
so
if I
sorry, I
gave
don't
you-
have my floor plans
Is that
with me.
the arts and crafts room?
But it's kind of, yeah, it's like an open area.
Yeah.
Okay, because it shows that there's a wall that's probably 3 or 4 feet off of the outside wall. So you're saying that loft and arts and craft area does go?
Yeah, it's an open area. There is gonna be a bathroom up there as well.
Got it. Okay, it may just be how I'm reading that attic floor plan, but I don't see the window
And
in
it's
that.
possible the other way is when you walk up the stairs for the headroom, that you walk up the stairs and at the very top of the stairs is the window 4 feet in front of you.
Got it.
So maybe a view out the window as you get to the top of the stairs.
I see, okay, so
Depending on which
a
way.
bit of a knee wall.
Yeah.
Okay, the existing chimney, I noticed when it protrudes above the roof line is natural brick and it's painted white below. What are your plans for the existing chimney?
Painting it white.
Paint the whole thing
Yeah.
white. Okay, and I noticed that you're mimicking the half moon gutters, the 6-inch gutters. Will there be round downspouts as well?
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Great. And then more just a comment rather than clarification. Tend to agree with Commissioner Gibson in this instance. The metal roof on that 812 is going to be a snow slide. And so you really got to watch that. So if that's something that you choose to move forward with, you might want to consider snow stops.
For sure.
Including the roof on the garage, although it's facing west. When the sun comes out and hits that, and you're trying to get in and out of that garage, it'll be a bit of a slide. So they look nice, but you just really do need to think about the functionality.
We will.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you very much. My fellow commissioners did a very thorough job, and your presentation was very thorough as well, so I don't have any additional questions, so.
Can I have one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one more. And this may be an anomaly. This goes back to the windows
Yep.
again. When I looked at the existing, let's say the existing north elevation, you know, the front of the house, and also then I looked at the proposed north elevation, it looked as if the windows had absolutely moved. In other words, you're blowing, which in a historic home, sometimes you try to avoid that. You try to keep the aperture, you try to keep the opening, and you you work with it. Are you moving all the windows?
No, we are moving because of the addition size, and, we looked at the size and how small we can make it or what would work. So 16 feet was kind of where we fell to. Doing that, we have to move those two closer on the, I guess, left-hand side of that plan.
Right.
And in doing that, they're actually offset. The windows on the far left and the far right are currently not set evenly. The ones on the left, I believe, are 22 and a half inches off the corner. So I want to make it so, equal. So moving those to be 22 and a half off that side, just to balance it. I'm kind of a anal person, so I didn't, if I'm gonna have to redo the siding on the entire front of the house, I would want them balanced and with that addition.
And is that also for, for the others as well? I mean, how many windows are you actually blowing? I mean, I know you're gonna replace all of those, okay?
Right.
And some aren't.
I believe 39.
Back, right, but are you actually moving the entire window over on, how many of those are you doing?
I don't have the math on exactly which ones I'm moving, but only the front we're moving considerably, which aren't, I guess, considerably feet. All the other ones might be an inch here or an inch there, but they're not, we're kind of sticking with the location they are, except for the kitchen, I'm told.
Okay, one last question. You have kind of a 3-bay window. You have 3 windows in the family room, I believe.
Correct.
And we've all had questions about the doors. Would you consider maybe making the center part of that a door? So that you don't have to carry those groceries?
Have you seen me? I'm the grocery carrier.
It's just a,
But
I'm in terms of as you go through the process of this.
The family rooms, well, I'll let her speak, but the family room is quite small. And if you looked at the floor plan, which I guess wouldn't be important to historical value, we're actually moving it back a little bit just so we can fit a couch and a chair. It is a small family room. So the door would have to then take up at least, 3-4 feet of walkway through. And not to say that, people wouldn't be there and you're walking through and interrupting whatever might be happening in the family room. It just seemed maybe not so practical, but I guess the flow on an everyday seemed to work best with the way we were thinking, I guess. We went through it quite a different placement of doors and windows, and this is what we came up with.
It's a cottage.
Yeah.
So that's what you're dealing with.
But
Thank you.
I do think the biggest change is on the east elevation where you're flipping the double bay windows with a single, right, within the dining room?
Yeah.
That's a wholesale change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're open for any public testimony or inquiry, so we wait for phone calls.
We do have one person who's been holding for quite a while, so let me see if I can. Are you still with us, Ms. Pasquazi?
I am still with you.
Okay, you are on with the board. Go ahead, please.
I'm concerned about the overall look and what it does to the historical district. And considering that with the city of Lake Forest, it really does give the rest of the residents a pretty hard time in terms of like when we renovate our homes. Like what are the restrictions that they're putting on the condo building?
It's the wrong petition that she's referring to.
Pasquazi, I'm sorry.
My heart was broken.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No callers? I don't know whether you have anyone in the audience who wishes to
Yes.
speak.
You do have.
I just have a question in looking at this north elevation.
Ms. Lopat, can you
You
go up
wanna-
to the microphone,
The
please?
podium,
Identify
please.
yourself.
Thank you.
My name is Rami Lopat, and this looks terrific. I'm familiar with your private road, and I really love that little road. In fact, some years ago, I did a some writing about streetscapes in Lake Forest and asked what people's favorite road is on a Facebook page, and they said Washington Road and specifically cited your lane. Anyway, I was questioning, speaking of snow, whether you considered having some kind of cover or porch over your front door as you are opening it in the rain. That's my question. Thank you.
So the eaves actually come out about 22 inches, so we are going to have a little bit of shelter. We actually opted to do more of a gas lantern over our front door, just because we love it. Again, we are going to be running to and from our garage a lot, so we're probably going to be soaking wet anyways. So at this point, I like the lantern just a little bit better. But it is a very good thought.
Anyone else? And no calls, right? All right, so it's back to us.
Oh, we got a couple more here.
Oh, excuse me, I didn't see you there.
Hi, we are Brian and Dena Butler. We live directly west of this property at 410 Washington.
And we were here last year, about this time, doing our house. Still not finished. But we're really excited about their house and how they're just making it just so beautiful, because it is very run down and very unattractive. And we love that the garage, we bought our house because it's so private, and we love that their garage makes our lot even more private. So we're very happy about the garage and the addition and everything they're doing. I just think it's going to be lovely.
Yeah, and the time and care they've put into the multiple iterations of their plans, we really respect and thank them. And we very much look forward to the very expensive dinner that they'll be hosting us at the end of their new project. And we just ask the board to support their wonderful plan.
Yeah, and we're excited to have them as neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward.
I just saw your house today for the first time after we gave you a certificate of appropriateness, and it's wonderful.
It looks fantastic.
It looks great.
Congratulations.
So congratulations.
We would love to, I talked to Jen about it, we would love to have this old house part, you guys can come and go and see how the
Oh, I'd
inside
love
will be
that.
brought back to old as well.
Great.
So we'll let Jen know and she can let you guys know.
Great.
Bribery doesn't work with us, just so you know. Never does. So, anyone else? All right, so it comes back to us for deliberation. Commissioner Lemon.
Certainly. I have two final questions, sorry, and then I'll do that.
Your question with your commentary.
I noticed that you're leaving the existing asphalt shingles on the roof, so apparently they're in good order,
They are.
and you'll be able to match the same for the garage?
We will.
And then I noticed on the
hallmark, it's exact same.
Great. The landscape plan, it does show an area across the lane, a bit of a circular area across the lane. It doesn't exist like that today. Is that part of this proposal?
We'd like to add some type of landscaping there to just create the drive up, to be a little more cohesive with our property, and just make the overall aesthetic for all of our neighbors. Great,
Okay, so we'll be there for the block party then. I'm very jealous of your gas lanterns. I've wanted them for many, many years, and I've told my wife I will have a house with gas lanterns, so I'm quite jealous. So I think that's a great addition to this. I love the fact that, quite frankly, you've rethought about how you're using the space, and you're going to be caretakers to this wonderful home, which has all of that attic space, which can then be used. So you've really had to go back and think about that, and I think that's allowed for this house to very much be preserved back to its original character. So congratulations. I think you've been very thoughtful on that. My first thought, to be quite honest with you, when I first received the packet, was that the garage was going to feel a bit overbuilt for the site. And when I went to the site and saw it staked out and started to understand the courtyard effect, it feels very appropriate, and it is subordinate to the house. So I think you've been quite respectful and made this property much more usable for a family. So I think well done. I'm quite supportive of the project. I would just have you take some of the considerations that we mentioned around the window consistency. Think about light spilling into the space, certainly a bit of the metal roof kind of things, more just for consideration. But I think what you're proposing is quite appropriate, and I'm supportive.
Good. Thank you very much. Commissioner Sperry.
I'm in support of this petition, and I look forward to seeing the after.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Pettit.
As I stated before, I'm in support of this petition. I did have one question as to, so many of, you said you were removing the one stair area that was a water problem. And down where the old garage was, there seemed to be a lot of water rot and that sort of thing there. And then the landscape plan seems to have like a gravel or something there. What are you doing to mitigate the water issues at that really, really low point?
Yeah, so the water has been, just the lot's been left to deteriorate and the water's running down that large cement wall. We've been working with Nick from Tesca to help, drain the property the proper way, along with Mike Black, who's going to help us with all the water remediation, with underground piping that's needed to make sure that the area that used to come all the way down and just pool with water and pool into that garage is diverted to where it was originally supposed to go, which is down towards the ravine and that big kind of sewer grate that you might see, without disturbing the ravine at all, and making sure it's, doesn't erode, because right now everything is just, pushing right down into it.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Commissioner Grinnell.
I have one more question also, but hopefully it will be a possible solution for you. If you look at the site plan and you go to the left, where are there other houses past yours as well?
Yes, that would be 410. That's-
Okay, all right. What about to the right?
No one,
Other
well,
side of the ravine, there is.
Okay, okay. As someone who also has a detached garage, I might suggest that what you could do is, when you have those groceries, is pause in front of your front door and run right in.
There you go.
And then repark in the garage. That will work.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I was planning on also just parking right at that bottom right-hand corner of the driveway.
Right.
Running through the back
Yeah,
door.
yeah. I mean, those
Tell me
are,
which one works out best.
yeah, let me know.
So I'm taking you're supportive as well.
I'm very supportive.
All right, great. Thank you.
I think it's a
All
great
right.
plan.
Commissioner Levitsky.
Thank you. I think you're doing a wonderful job with this house. I found that I've been on the commission for about a year. When anybody comes before the commission with a house that's been abandoned for many years, they want to knock it down. And really, it's to your credit that you want to make this house even better than before. There is one concern that is in Jen's report about the ravine, again, the deck. And the sentence is, the city engineer reviewed the proposed plans and noted that it appears that the construction of the deck will not significantly impact the ravine. That's hardly a ringing endorsement. And I guess I hope the engineer looks over it carefully. But otherwise, I think what you're doing is great, and I'm very supportive of your plan. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Commissioner Gibson.
Okay. Well, I apologize thinking that you may have been from Florida, not knowing our winters, but I now know that you do.
Got it figured out.
Yeah, I have figured it out. And I'd just like to ask that you maybe even work with staff a bit in terms of revisiting other windows and making certain that they're as vertical and narrow as possible for the look of the cottage. It's a great cottage from the early 20s. I'd like to see the consistency. And of course, I keep going back to the steel metal roof. The seamed metal roof, because it is visible. And you could certainly use asphalt there, and asphalt shingles, and it would be fine. The deck is also something that I would make certain that you check with people to make, so that it's workable, and it certainly is serviceable. I mean, you're going to be using it a lot. So congratulations. I love the project. I love the cottage, and I'm so glad you're doing something about it. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
All right, thank you. All right, well, I think you heard that everybody is supportive. I'm equally supportive, and I'll just throw out a few summary comments. One is, and this is more a personal bent, so to speak. There was conversation about the windows, and I certainly, we always invite people to just put extra work into refinement. You've been doing it for a long time, so I don't think there's any concern here that you'll continue to look at that. And there may be some refinements that you can make. At the same time, what I enjoyed about this house when I looked at it in its original state, that oftentimes our standards suggest that everything should be symmetrical. But the fact of the matter is there's some wonderful architects that put all sorts of asymmetry into homes.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have a little tuck-in window somewhere that doesn't match anything. But there was a reason for it. I have no issue with you wanting to provide symmetry in there, but to the degree that you don't have exact symmetry in places, I think back to the comment of it really had a cottage feel. It's part of its character. There may be a place where it's just serendipitous and it's just kind of fun to have it there. And I don't think it'll destroy anything by any means. So I think you have an option to look at those things. There was a discussion on the roof. It sounds like you're very open to at least look at that. It's not a condition of approval. It sounds like all the comments, at least from my standpoint, the goal was to be constructive. Everybody's worried about you running through the rain and the snow. So, so I would certainly encourage you, though, and I know you've done a lot of soul searching, but there may be a place to add some kind of a door opening. If you're really just trying to get access, it doesn't have to be a full-size door. I mean, there are a lot of little residents that somehow put in little pocket doors or just smaller spaces there. And visually, you wouldn't even notice it so much, but it gives you some access you might not have otherwise. So, and I think we're all open to that, and if it works, have at it. So with that, I welcome a motion from anyone. Yes, Commissioner Sperry.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the petition located at 420 Washington Road and grant a certificate of appropriateness as requested to allow construction of a 3-car detached garage and a single-story addition to the front of the existing home. Associated exterior alterations are also going to be approved as proposed, as well as a conceptual landscaping plan and overall site plan. This will be done in terms of the complete staff report and materials, including in the packet, pages 3 through 7.
Wonderful. Do I have a second? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ron, did I hear you?
Want a roll call?
Yes, sir, and aye.
Okay, all right. So we're all set. Congratulations. Good to seeing you. Right, next this evening is continued consideration of a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the 3rd condominium building, which is proposed as the final phase of the McKinley Road multifamily plan development. This 3rd building is proposed on the south side of Westminster, east of phases 1 and 2 that we walked earlier today, and north of the library. The commission this evening is charged specifically with considering the overall architectural design of the building, massing roof forms, detailing, exterior materials, the landscape plan, and exterior lighting. The building as proposed, as we've seen, is now 2 stories and follows the design and materials of the building in the earlier phase. And we have Mr. Whitmer presenting this evening. And before I start up, I'll ask if there's any conflicts or ex parte contacts. Anyone?
No.
Mr. Levitsky? Commissioner? Commissioner Levitsky, can you hear us?
I'm sorry?
I just want to make sure, no, I was just asking about conflicts or ex parte contacts.
Oh, I'm sorry, no conflicts.
All right, wonderful. Thank you.
And Chairman, maybe while the petitioner is gearing up, I will, for those who may be watching at home, after the petitioner's presentation and after the commission asks initial questions, if you are at home and you want to call in and testify, the number is 847-810-3689. If you call in, please be patient. We'll put you on hold and we'll bring you into the meeting as soon as the time is right. Thank you.
Great. And Kathy, any additional context or anything else you want to present at this point, or we'll just start right up?
I would start with the petitioner.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
Great, thank you. First off, thanks for everybody taking the time and walking out to the site. I thought that was good in terms of understanding the context of which we're working with and actually seeing sort of the full scale of the project. I'm going to cover a few things here, basically go through some notes from our last meeting and then go through the 17 standards. And then a couple additional thoughts just at the end of the presentation. So last time we were here, it was, I think, January of last year. Quite a bit has changed since then. And we've had a lot of time, actually, to sort of go back and rethink this. The main things, we had three ideas. One, work with the neighbors to make the design compatible with the existing buildings, and two, and the third being reduce the overall height. And it's interesting how it evolved in terms of, you know, some of these solutions work together. We approached the neighbor who owned the building or the house. It's 373 Westminster. We had worked with for quite a while. They had a number of issues in terms of the existing house and its grading situation, its drainage and all that. We really felt that there was really a solution to purchase the property and integrate it into our program. And so with that, we were able to correct all the ills of the existing house and really create a site that was suitable for a new home. And then with some additional area is make the project a two-story versus a three-story building that we originally were proposing. And that allows us really what we thought made a lot of sense, which came out of the last meeting here, was to really integrate this in as one development with the other two buildings. And I think, you know, we struggled with all kinds of different roof shapes and all different kinds of things to make it fit in. And really what it made sense to us was to reduce the overall height and make it a two-story and have that be the scale relationship to the neighbors to the east. The 385 Westminster, we worked with that owner. They had requested that we look at their property and see if we would integrate it into the plan too. We did, and they decided that it didn't really work for them to leave, which I completely understand in terms of it's a great place to live. And our thoughts were that to basically keep the house and it would just give them a different way to move forward. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we proposed to mitigate our project in relationship to their property. The existing building we talked about making it match the other building. And then the last, as I've discussed, is the going from 3 stories to 2 stories. The 17 standards is which this project is evaluated by this board, and basically the standards are applied to all visible public streets or public ways. So one of the things that's interesting to look at this is that I know that the Westminster Streetscape is an important one, but the total frontage of the public ways are really Westminster, the north-south street, and then the library and its access to there. So total frontage is about 550 square feet. The north-south street and the our streets within the subdivision, which are public ways in the library, is about 80% of the overall project. In the Westminster Streetscape is in terms of frontage is about 23%. So I think while we understand it and want to integrate it into the Westminster, and we are concerned about how that fits in, we want to make sure that it's really comprehensive to integrate it into not only the library, the church, the other 2 condominium buildings, and the 333 condominium building too, as making it a cohesive development. And I think that's an important point. The other is so just going through the standards, the standard of height. We just did some mathematics in terms of we separated it as the Westminster versus the other context that we talked about. The average heights of those addresses is about 32 feet, and our parapet height is 31. So we're pretty consistent there. Obviously, the other structures on the other piece are higher. It's about 40 feet because we're stepping down a story. So that makes sense that that's 40 and we're about 10 foot less. These are just the visuals, which give the dimensions of the streetscapes. These are the sections through going east, north-south, and east-west. And here you can see the relationship of the neighborhood, the stepping down from the 3-story existing 723, 727 building to our 715 building, then down to the 385 and the 403 property. Proportion of the front facades. So this would be the width and the height relationships. If you look at the Westminster Streetscape, it's about a proportion of width is 60 feet, and the height is 32 feet, the same as it was for the height of the buildings, which gives you a ratio of about 1.8. Our piece, we looked at it in 2 different pieces. One is the original piece that sits out on the face, and then the piece that sits back 35 feet. I had shown you where the drive goes down, the trees are set back. Those relationships you can see is 1.6 and then 2.4 for the wider as it gets back and moves to the north. So those are in compatibility of that. This is the visuals of that in terms of the widths. The proportions of the openings. So this will be just that our openings are basically masonry, 3 foot by 6 foot double hung windows, which are ganged together to make 6'6" openings and 6 foot wide, 8 foot doors, very similar to the houses, residential stock. Obviously, it matches identical to the other 2 buildings and is similar to the 333 building for that. Rhythm of voids and solids in the front facades. This is an interesting piece. So basically what we talked about was the idea of taking the kit parts that was be developed in the other 2 phases and applying them to the 2-story building and applying them to not only the different elevations, but the Westminster elevation too. So we have this front porch piece that is protruding out, which is similar to the other porches in the other homes along that area. We have the center portion of the building, and then we have the protruding wing on the east side, and then the 35 feet back we have the other balancing wing that steps back. So this is a similar piece where you have the porch, the main body of the house, and the gable protruding out on the end. So it has those elements that are somewhat similar. This just shows the streetscape for that. The other piece that I think is important is the solid and voids in the relationship to the front elevation. I think we explained this in the walkthrough quite a bit of the balconies that protrude out, and then the balcony in the center elevation that lines up through there. The rhythm of spacing of structures on the street. So this is space between structures. You can see the average on Westminster is about 43 feet, and ours is about 50 feet. Somewhat similar, so you can see that the spacing there is similar. By the additional space that we have allows us to have a little more space between the coach house to the west and our buildings. We have about 70 feet on one side, and then to the setback line from our building to the new for the house that will be designed in the future is about 30 feet there. Rhythm. Again, the rhythm and spacing of the structures on the street. I think you could also talk about that as a visual axis that we talked about, and it's very apparent when you're on the site of the visual axis that is shown. So that the space between the 2 buildings is very important, and the space that we create around these buildings are very important. The front yards and the spaces that we create on Westminster are similar in scale to the spaces across the street as opposed they are on the new lot that is created. And so this is just a combination of all those spaces. So the idea of the space between the buildings and the axes, the idea of the space in front of the building, which you can see in scale, is similar even to the library, and its front yard piece to that. The green space, we've made the comparison to the green space of Market Square, and we had a chance to look at that. And I would lastly say the yellow spaces that we show here are private outdoor spaces and patio spaces, which are very important to the units in the development of the units within themselves. Rhythm of porch entrances and front recesses and projections. So I think on the Westminster elevation, we have the protruding porch, which has its French doors that they go into the entrance, and then obviously the entrances along the west elevation, which are the two entrances that go into the lobbies of the building, which are mimic exactly what is on the other two buildings. You can see them here on the picture there. Relationship of, I'm sorry, this is a lot of material to cover.
Right.
I'll be as brief as I possibly can. Materials and textures on the Westminster Streetscape, obviously most homes are all kinds of different things, stucco, clapboard, brick. But we felt very strongly that the relationship of the other context was really strong, and that our building should be brick and really tie into the church, the train station, and the library, and I think that you saw that on the site. For that relationship to texture of the materials, of the detailing, and I think we had a chance to examine all the different pieces of the building and how we, it's pretty fortunate that we're able to see this sort of full-scale detail of all the pieces that go together that comprise of the building. The roof shapes, we talked about that on the site, and I think, again, I thought it was very strong in the site, is that this is a flat roof building, and that it matched the other two buildings, and I think that, its contrast, even though it's flat roofed, its edge of the roof and the cornice and the breaking of it up with openings allow for a movement. The other is that it allows the dome of the church, or I'm sorry, the dome of the library, the gable of the church, and also the towers of Market Square to really be the focus, and this to be more of a background type building. So I feel that this makes a lot of sense. This is a divergence from where we started. We started with a sort of a two-story building with a bunch of different roof shapes on it, and I feel like this is a much more successful massing in the overall. Here you can just see there is the house just east obviously has a flat roof, so there are some residential houses that have similar type flat roofs too. Walls of continuity. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and we were able to point this out on the site, is that this idea of the wall continuity of the Westminster, so that the 351 house really steps out in prominent onto the street. So its setback was 36 feet from the curb edge to that. So it's really prominent out, and that our building and our face of our building really is back, not only at the body, you can see the little wings stick out of the 333, but our face of our two-story building is actually back. You can see in relation to the 401, it's basically at the hind door, or the back elevation on the two-story piece. Our one-story porch protrudes forward on that. Also, I'd talk about the walls of continuity is the streetscape of the two streets and how they are aligned, and the importance of those walls that they continue. I'd also talk about the continuity of the open spaces. So in the first phase, we have this half of the green space is open, and that we're continuing that into this phase 3. So that's an important piece to that, and also that the front yards are continuous across not only this space, but will be just based on the setbacks of the new created lot. This is just a, oops, let me go back one. So this is we're standing here, and I thought that was pretty good. So the continuity of the front yards and how they set back, and this is looking up the other way, which has the house prominent in the yards that are continuous. This is the half of the space that's there now, and the other half of the green space, courtyard space on the south edge of the building. Scale of the structure. So this is really a combination of the height and width of that, and I basically just took the same averages, which were on the heights and widths of the buildings, and show the corresponding coordination of that. The directional expression of the front elevation, there are what I would say probably 3 fronts to the building. The front door is actually on the west elevations, the 2 front doors. There's a front to the building in terms of the front door this way. We both have vertical and horizontal expressions, the coins on the corners being the vertical piece and the elements, while the overall massing is somewhat horizontal. So we call it really a non-directional design on those pieces. 12's not applicable. Protection of resources, really trees. We are removing some trees, and we're replanting them in basically in the tree-lined north-south street in the courtyard in the front yard. This is the landscape plan. We do have Colleen from Mariani Landscape here to answer any landscape questions specific for that. New construction. One is that the building be one consistent style, and I think that's one of the things that we really worked at, and we kind of struggled with in the other designs. I mean, you know, I have to count, but I think we have 5 or 6 different other designs, which were sort of, you know, half giraffe, half horse, half whatever, to try to go to the context of where they were looking at. And I think it really does make sense, once we were able to make a 2-story building, is to really tie the two together and to really make that cohesive with it. So we feel strongly that this is those comments back on our last HPC meeting, when Jan said, hey, did you ever think of a 2-story building? And I was thinking, no, I never did. But I think that us, you know, really rethinking it, being able to acquire the property, while, you know, it would have been a much easier path to do something else. But I think this is the right path. And so, you know, we're back here now with the correct zoning and all the things, implements for this. And it was it was not an easy path to go. There was an easier way to do it, but I think this is the right one. 15's not applicable, 17's not applicable, so that gives it. So I'm just going to run really quick through the Revit renderings of this. I have them both without landscape or without it shaded and with, because I do think that the landscape is an important element to the overall design of these things. They have been in every project that we do. But I do think that there's an importance also seeing of the massing of this. So this will be looking west into that open space. This is the existing building that we looked at, that's the porch that we saw. Here's the edge of the Phase 3 building and how it relates to the other building. This is looking down the axis to the east, the porch and the end axis to this, the entrance into the 2 existing buildings. This is the corner in the open space. If we're looking northeast, these are the 2 entrances into the building. It's subdivided into the 2 elements that are protruding out, and then this is the element that lines up on to the axis of the main street. This will be looking at the streetscape from Deer Path up past the library on the east side. This is looking down that axis that we talked about. As you walk down, you have this road and this continuum, and then you have the dome and the gable of the library in the background. This is looking from the southeast corner, looking at the Phase 1 building, 2 building, and then our 3rd building there. This is looking toward the east through that green space. This is looking down the Westminster. This is looking back west on Westminster. Across the street, this is really further than you can really get, but you can see the sense of the pieces, and this steps back and relates to the body of the 333 and our piece that steps back for that. And then these are the colored elevations of the same thing. And you can see that the landscape is a dominant feature, and I think when you're there, it is. If you look at Regents Row, you can't look at Regents Row without the trees in it. Very different, and I think that's a really important element. You can see the money that we spend in terms of the initial plannings and how they strive and all that. So the landscape plan is successful, not only short term but long term in this project. And again, you have the streetscape with the trees on the other side. They're picked up with the 2 trees on the other side. That would be the open space beyond. These are the trees that separate as you walk into that open space. It creates the courtyard to the south. This is that courtyard south, tree line borders on both sides. And this is across the street. This is looking down the front yards our building, you can't really see it. Looking up the other way, again, that's the 351 house. These are just the elevations, exterior elevations. I wanted to spend a little bit of time, and I realize this is a difficult project for everybody involved, and we're trying to be as sympathetic as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do that. The neighbor in the adjoining house, we'd originally had proposed to have landscape, and a little bit disappointed we didn't get to see that space. There's basically a lot of trees in there right now, which are weed type trees. We thought it would make sense to redo that. We do have, the nice thing about that, we have 15 feet of space in there, so that we have a fair amount of space in terms of putting not only initial trees in of a pretty good caliber, but also ones that will grow up over time. There are some grading issues here. There's some water issues that we could take care of and solve that. And I really feel like once we get past the emotional part of it, we can really make that situation much better for them. There's a power line that goes down that currently feeds the existing house, which is problematic for them, that we will solve. There's a water problem in terms of an existing storm line that percolates at grade and drains through this space, which we'll be able to pick up with our storm sewer through there and do that. So there's a lot of good things that we can do, and we're happy to make the resolution in the future. We realize that, you know, this is a big, a larger building and next to them, and I think there are things that we can do to better the situation in terms of landscaping, and, you know, we're open for different ideas. I mean, I think that we've always strived to do that. I think that's about it. I think we touched on the mechanical equipment being hidden by the parapets. You saw that. The roofs are important elements. They're private spaces for the individual units that are on the second floor. And I think that's worked out very well in the first two buildings. And that will be on this building too. We've tried to zone those so that they're, you know, away from nuisance and different things. And the last thing I would say is that while our plans are open in terms of that, we sell white boxes and we custom design every unit inside of it, that the spaces naturally, there's typically we're having 3 units. So there's a center unit, there's a north unit, and a south unit. The south units typically have their public spaces, living rooms, family room, look out through the axis so that they see the view of markets or the train station. The center units are actually between the site. It has its little backyard courtyard, which opens up to the backyard of the other lot, which is really nice. Typically there are bedrooms along the exterior walls, and the front unit really looks out through the front yard in terms of its public spaces. Typically the bedrooms along the west wall. Guest rooms and laundries are typically along the streetscape. So it's nice because there's only so few units that really the living spaces are toward the ends and then right toward the center, which is really at the center. I can't guarantee you what the final layouts are on people, but that's typically, that's the way we would see the building laid out. So with that, I've taken a lot of my time. Sorry about that, but appreciate that. I'm sure there's lots of questions and comments, and happy to answer any of those things.
All right, thank you very much. Kathy?
Thank you, Chairman Grieve. Just a little bit of background, a little bit of review. The discussion of multifamily residential development in this area has probably been going on for the past 10 years. So this unified development has been well discussed, and having those zoning entitlement discussions, those long-term planning discussions occur before the Historic Preservation Commission gets involved does not deviate from a normal subdivision process or other developments where those decisions, you often see, most often, almost always see projects when a lot is already created, often when a house has already been built. So it's not unusual for projects to come to you when some decisions have been made, and that is exactly the case with this project. The decisions about density, about zoning, about setbacks, about just the basic fact that this parcel is intended to be part of a multifamily development, those decisions have been made. So what is in front of the Preservation Commission is not any of the multiple plans that were presented in the past. What's in front of you tonight is what was just presented by Mr. Whitmer. And your charge is to evaluate the design aspects of that development, that building, the proposed landscaping, based on your 17 standards. That is the commission's narrow role. When this project came to you just about a year and a half ago, it was very different. It was a 3-story building, and through efforts to respond to considerable input from the Plan Commission as well as residents, the building began to not feel like part of a unified development. There were concerns about the mansard roof, thought that that was just being used to attempt to hide a 3rd floor. So your discussion in January of 2020 really set this development in a different direction, and it was that direction that then later led to the City Council ultimately voting to approve this development. It is unusual for the Commission to be able to see a full-size mock-up, which really is the case here. We often ask developers to bring in materials or to stake something out on the ground. You had the opportunity tonight, and for the record, I do want to note that all 7 commissioners did walk the site. It was a publicly noticed part of this meeting. So it was an opportunity to see in real life the first 2 buildings, which are 3 stories as opposed to 2, but reflect the same detailing, the same quality of exterior materials. You also were able to see the landscaping. Certainly it is still growing in, but you were able to experience the sense of walking down that new east-west road, getting a sense of that overall development. I will not review specific aspects. You do have a detailed staff report. You heard a detailed presentation. Staff does believe that this project does meet the applicable standards. We do recommend approval of a certificate of appropriateness. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
Okay, this is to staff. Is this okay to do this now?
Absolutely.
I have a question about the 373 building, which often we call the Donovan structure. And I know that it was on the HPC calendar maybe in 2016, I think we saw in the report. But I had heard in our last meeting that it had been given approval for demo. So that was one of the points of that. However, normally when we have a demo, we have a replacement structure in front of us. So I know that an architect brought forth a plan, but then it never came back. What's the result of that in terms of legality and in terms of our code?
The demolition that was presented by a different property owner and the replacement structure was ultimately approved by this commission. It was never constructed, obviously, the house was never demoed. That approval is expired. However, in the council's approval of this development, the west approximately 35 feet of that parcel is included in this development. So that approval is there. Any redevelopment of the eastern portion of that lot, any new single-family home proposed for that lot will require Historic Preservation Commission approval.
So the commission, so the HPC will not have to grant the demolition of the existing house. It would just be demolished at whenever with the new owner. And all we would be dealing with is the new structure coming in at a later date. Am I right?
Correct. And certainly the council weighed carefully the fact that the existing house had already been determined by the commission to not be significant. Certainly,
right.
That determination was made in conjunction with an acceptable replacement structure. Any replacement structure will require HPC review and approval.
So the HPC, the current HPC, would not be able to see a structure next to the new development. We're going to be dealing with the development first and then a new structure at a later date.
Correct.
Okay, and that's
It would
all
essentially
legal.
be an infill lot as you see in other parts of the community.
Okay, and that's a legal thing to do. In other words, it's legal.
The
go through
council
that.
approvals acknowledge that the 373 house would need to be demolished in order to achieve the project they approved, yes.
I have a second question. We deal.
Can I just ask a question to clarify that? So,
Clarification.
but you did say, Kathy, that the demolition permit has expired from the HPC.
From the previous petitioner, correct.
So wouldn't we need to
Correct.
re-grant that? Wouldn't that need to be part of this petition? To demolish that existing property?
We can certainly talk with the city attorney and bring that back to you if appropriate. The council's action did acknowledge that that house would need to be demolished.
Yep.
The code does provide for administrative approvals of demolitions. And again, the groundwork was laid, a decision was made by this commission once that that house was not significant historically, that it met the demolition criteria. But we can certainly review that with the city attorney and bring that back to the commission if necessary.
Technically, it's not
Absolutely.
in their purview to approve the demolition. It's this commission's.
Is this commission?
Purview.
Right.
Correct. And consider too, it's a new owner. So the previous approval of the demolition has now expired. Therefore, we would need, I would think, to see the new certificate request for demolition on the newly proposed structure as well.
We can certainly check with the city attorney and bring that back to you, the demolition piece back to you if determined to be necessary. We'll certainly check on that.
Question 2. It has to do with the FAR scale, and that's the floor area ratio. Do we not deal with that for a multifamily unit? I mean, we haven't dealt with we deal with it all the time, looking at variances and bulk and massing and so forth, and attic space and whatnot. On this one, we're dealing with a certain size, but we're really not dealing with looking at any kind of a FAR scale. Is that correct on a multifamily?
That is correct. The building scale ordinance applies to single-family homes and duplexes.
Okay, all right. And the third question that I have for staff, and that will eventually get to the petitioner, is I will point out where the pictures are on this, the penthouse quote that they're referring to. We had asked about a 2-story building, and this, even today walking past the Phase 2 building, I kind of estimated the extent of the property or the rooftop as perhaps 30 feet by maybe 20 feet on the roof. And it had structure, it had brick, and it had, looked like steel supports. And is that not something that, because of the mass of it, which doesn't show on the roof here, did everything get into the packet, I guess I could say, or ask in terms of what we need to decide certain things today? Did everything come in as, you've assembled everything because of the penthouse that really is not that visible that we see in
I believe it is reflected on some of the images. Penthouses on commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, are common to hide mechanicals, to house an elevator overrun. So a penthouse is, in fact, the code allows penthouses to rise above the allowable building height. In this case, it doesn't. No variances are requested. So I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but the penthouse is not unlike the penthouses that are on the Phase 1 and Phase 2 buildings.
Okay,
And
all right.
it is centered in the roof, and I'm sure Mr. Whitmer can talk about the size and
All right.
And the height.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was it.
You can continue. More questions?
Okay, well, now my questions are to the petitioner. Some time ago, I talked to one of the aldermen, the current alderman, and the alderman said, you know, obviously we follow the 17 standards, that's our Bible, basically. And also, we need to listen to the community. And in this case, I know that I was on kind of a, I live next to Kelmscott, and so it was, we had the neighbors and, you know, we wanted certain things and we negotiated and finally got things that worked. We only had 800 signed petitions. This community has about 1,400 that I know of. And when I calculated the number of people in town and also the number of residents, and I have no idea who signed this, it could easily be, I mean, this is sizable. It could be between 15 and 20% of the residents, the residences in town who have, they're not NIMBYs. From what I've heard from 2 plan commission meetings that I've listened in on in a city council meeting, or 2 of those, they weren't talking about not putting anything in. It was just put something in that we like, that works, and that relates to their area. I wanted to know from you, in one point you mentioned working with the neighbor, and that was 383, to try to deal with working with that neighbor. What are you doing about the rest of the community, the rest of the people, in terms of what are you working through with them in terms of getting things right?
I think the public process that we've started with this, you know, is going on for 5 years with this. And so, you know, our working with the community started 5 or 6 years ago with it. It would have been much easier for us not to involve the city property and just build one big building in our whole site. And so that involving the city process and the city community and its different boards and commissions through the years, we feel like we have listened to the community and gotten with the community. In that, I understand we're not going to make everybody happy, and we're not going to have everyone agree on what the solution is. As I say, it would have been much easier for us probably not to buy the property, the 373 property, and just, you know, we had an appeal on our last, an appeal to city council and go forward with that. That would have been a much easier process for us financially. It would have been a much better solution. We wouldn't have been at risk for a lot more money. So I think the process that we do and have gone through, you know, I'm sure that the people in this room that are showing up are obviously not in favor or you know, have concerns about that. We listen to that process. We understand it. We've evolved into what the building we think really is, and we really feel like this has been you know, I can't comment on a partition or you know, to be honest, I don't really follow Facebook. I don't follow social media, and I don't think it's a good thing to do. I do listen to the boards and commissions. I do listen to the community. I do listen to the residents that are in there. I listen to the resident, you know, I read every letter that comes to me in opposition and pick. We did have public meetings in the neighborhood about that. To be honest, they didn't really bear much fruit. There weren't solutions, you know, the solutions that were being proposed by them were really unrealistic in terms of the ability to have the property and develop the property. So I feel very confident that we have the right solution here. And I know there's a lot of different opinions on that, but I think as you walk around the site and you see it and you see the relationship of the other pieces, I mean, the Westminster piece is important, I understand that. But the context of the other buildings and how this relates to the other, we've spent an enormous amount of time developing that and money, and real money.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you say that we haven't listened, I take offense to that because I have, you know, a stack of models in our office that we have 5 or 6 different schemes for that. We've looked at all different possibilities. Obviously, there's certain things that we're just not able to do. Okay. So, you know, I feel like we've worked very hard on this. And so, you know, when you say that we haven't listened,
Well, I was just
don't-
asking, what you have
Well,
you done? Yeah.
I don't think, well, that's,
Yeah.
personally, I do take some offense to that.
All right. Second question, and this deals with standard 2, the proportion of the front facade. When I went through, actually, and you showed it on a slide in terms of the width of the buildings, you know, the structures, okay, whether it was an Italianate or, you know, shingle or whatever, Queen Anne, Prairie style, all of them were much more narrow than, and this is the width, okay, than your building. And you actually had it down at 51 feet, and then plus the setback was 75 feet. Is this, that's basically another third of the width of anything in the historic district. And I was looking at that thinking, wow, that's sizable. Can you respond in that?
Sure. I'm just looking for the.
Yeah, the
chart
slide you
that
had,
I
it was
have. Okay, here we go.
It was-
All right,
there-
so these are the
that's
widths of the
height.
houses that are visibly from the public way on the Westminster Streetscape. They average 32 feet. What I've put on the two different widths, oh no, I'm sorry, this is the height,
Yeah.
the width. Sorry about that. There we go. Proportion of the facade.
And you did have it at 75.
Yeah, I have it
okay.
both, because I wanted to recognize that
That people
there was a width to the face out there,
Right,
35
and
feet
the
back,
setback.
but the landscape piece
Yeah.
with it going down is wider. You're only taking the proportion of the buildings on Westminster.
Right.
If you take the proportion of the buildings of the library, our buildings, the 333 buildings, they're much wider. So that's my point, is the context is, you can't look at this, you don't, in the standards don't say, oh, we should just look at this in terms of the historic district. It says you should see it visible from every public way. So you don't just take the context of the historic, you take it all the way around. Actually, 80%, that's my point, is 80% of it is really the library, the church, our existing condo buildings, the old condo buildings. That's 80% of the context. 20% is the Westminster scape. I would argue that it does fit in the proportions of that.
Okay.
And if you look at the average, we're probably smaller than the average of those. So I think that's the perspective which we view it, and it isn't a single-family house. It isn't zoned as a single-family house, and I think it's going to be wider than that.
Okay. Next is on the height. That's standard number 1, and you had a slide of the dimensions on that. And when you look at on the penthouse that you're not including in this, no one seems to think of the penthouse as being part of this thing, where I'm looking at it saying that's pretty tall. You have a 31.5 feet for your 715 Westminster, your building, but you probably have another, 10 or 12 feet more with the...
No, actually, because the penthouses sit down, they're actually 30 feet, so it's 42 inches down for the parapet wall that covers it, and then it's basically 8.5 feet from the top of the roof to the top of the penthouse, so they're about 4 feet taller. So we have them about 31 or 34 feet to the top of the penthouses. They are set back quite a ways from the edge of the street, so we do show them on all the elevations. They're indicated there. You can see those on all our elevations that we provided for that. We do recognize that's part of the building and that's part of the access to that. But we understand the concern of the overall height. We're still below the 35-foot allowable for that. So, I think the idea that it's a 3-story building to me seems a little bit peculiar, but that's where we are with
Okay, all
that.
right.
It would be similar if we were to add I don't know if I make the comparison, but, do we add chimneys?
Right.
Do chimneys,
Right.
are part of that. And I think Kathy alluded to penthouses, these are access, basically, ways to get up to the roof.
Okay,
for
all
that.
right. The brick and mortar, did you have 2 masons deal with the front part of the front facade of the, let's say, phase 2, and the back facade, or the back elevation at all? Did you do the brick panels separately and then put them up? I mean, I asked a question about that when we were out there. Or was that done on site, right there?
No, they're all built, it was done with one mason, all on site.
Okay,
built.
all right. Okay, I just, I know that somebody had mentioned are you going to use the same brick on this building?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, and fenestration around the windows. What are you planning? The coins are great, but what are you planning, other kind of fenestration around the metal windows?
I didn't point that out. I should have pointed that out. So we have a large a brick mold has an OG on it and then has a little in and out. And so we're planning on using that. Those are on the existing building. I should have showed you that. Yeah,
okay.
if you see it, it's actually a nice little
There's an
detail
OG.
that
Okay.
gives a little brick molded around. It's about 4 inches, so we're planning on doing that.
All right. Would you consider putting, rather than the screen porch on the Westminster side as the front of the building, in some states, the streetscape, if a building is on a corner and it has 2 streetscapes, and in other words, you're treating the front facade as that's the front facade to the back of the Phase 1 and 2 buildings, and often people will say, well, what about the streetscape? In fact, I think somebody even wrote a question about it. What about Westminster Streetscape? Would you consider putting maybe a door, rather than the 2 doors you have on either side of the screen porch? Would you consider putting a major door to that particular unit to make it more inviting, to make it appear as if it's part of the streetscape?
I think one is by the setback that it aligns, that it isn't out at the face, that it's set back from the other, allows it to be more of a side yard than a front door piece to it. In the units themselves, the exterior spaces in the first floor is very important. So in that front unit, really the front terrace is really their outdoor space. Much like you saw at the corner of that existing screened-in porch. So that element is a pretty important one in terms of the space that's created there for that unit. I guess it would be peculiar how to get to that front door, how you get through to the front yard, how you'd have a sidewalk up to it. All those things would be somewhat difficult, I think, to do.
There was a question from the packet about the lights, about light pollution. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And I noticed that you didn't have any down lights. You had lights in the front of the building, on the front facade, not on the back.
Right.
So, but are there any? And you don't know yet how you're going to configure the building from the inside, but will there be, obviously, to the elevators, if there are elevators, you walk in and it's a public area, you're going to have lights on due to code. And so that's going to be light 24/7. And is there any way that you could, protect the neighbors from that light spillover?
So both of the entrances are off of the north-south street.
Right.
So at night, we have a light that lights up that entrance, and actually, it's very helpful in terms of keeping the sort of the street lighting.
Sure.
So that is the street lighting. The nice thing about the way it's designed on that, we have no exterior lighting that is really facing east.
Okay.
The other thing is some of the earlier designs, we were trying to get outdoor spaces. When we had a 3-story building, we had to try to create these outdoor spaces for a second level, which makes terraces off, and then we have terraces out at the second level, which are really, I think are problematic in terms of the neighbors. So we don't have any of that now. So we don't have any lights. And all our exterior lighting on porches and terraces are, directional, straight down, non-intrusive on that basis. So I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's a good one. That a lot of the earlier designs, we had some outside second level terraces, which would be have the potential of having some issues, in terms of that.
All right, thank you. That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levitsky, questions?
Thank you. Mr. Whitmer, when I read the minutes from the two meetings in 2020, and the word transition was used a lot, almost like a mantra, and I haven't really heard that word today. Can you explain your vision for what your 715 building, how it's going to be how you'd like to be a transition from the busier business side of the town to the more the homes? Can you explain what you hope to accomplish through the transition?
Sure. Our transition we see is going from a 3-story building to a 2-story building, and that's the main that it steps down. So I think in the massing model, as you look at it, it steps down to the scale of houses much better than this 3-story solution. We are putting a condo building in there. It has a larger footprint than the single-family houses. There's no question about that. But so I think that the transition going from the 2 buildings that we have as a 3-story to a 2-story is that transition, and we haven't used that word, but that is what we feel is a very successful transition from this into then the single-family house.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then a second question, the neighbor, some neighbors have written letters concerned about privacy. Could you explain how you hope to deal with that in terms of whatever landscaping, fencing, whatever, to secure their privacy, the ones who are right beside the building? Sure.
Yeah, I think, one of the things is it's nice about the plan, and I had touched on the landscaping plan, because I do think that our current landscaping plan had contemplating having trees and we're on the neighbor's property and working with that and really eradicating sort of a bad situation there. If that's not possible, we still have 15 feet within our space to plant trees. We have between the 333 building and our building on the first, we have somewhat of the same sort of situation. We have probably 45-foot pine trees that are between the 2 buildings, which are a pretty good block between that. So I'm pretty confident that we can have a landscape solution, both being evergreen and deciduous, to work with that space in terms of minimizing the impact to the neighbors, to that neighbor property. Also, too, I think by not having any outdoor spaces at the second level, and then I had talked about also mainly the bedrooms being located in that, or help in terms of minimizing the impact of that.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
Yes, one more. The green space that's by the library, is that in any way blocked by fencing, or is that totally open from going from the building to the library?
Okay, so going from the building to the library. The library, on the library property line, we're proposing that we have a wrought iron fence, much like what we have in the front, but there will be open, so it'll have a canopy of trees above it, but visually you'll be able to see through that from the library into that space. It will contain that space, so with a wrought iron fence, which is similar to the fence that's across the front. The difference being that we won't have a row of arborvitae, which provides privacy for those outdoor spaces in the front of the building.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Commissioner Grinnell?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions myself. This is my first meeting, but I was able to see some of the prior meetings as well as watch the video and read the documents. There's a lot on here. My recognition, you've done a lot to create the design match with the existing building, reducing that height to 2 stories. Thank you for doing that. My greatest concern is that I realize that this is called a building on McKinley. Actually, and I understand why, and I understand where the front door is, but actually very much like the 333 building on Westminster, that does face Westminster. And if you look at the this particular slide, if you could call that one back up again, which has the north elevation and the south elevation. The north elevation, I'll give you a minute to bring that back up.
This is the perspective that you're looking at?
Actually, no, this is the one that doesn't have the landscaping, and it doesn't have as much of a perspective.
Oh,
But
okay,
it's
so
the
that's the
north-
flat elevation.
Exactly, the north versus south.
Okay. Okay, so that would be,
That's close, you know, that shows enough of what this
Yep.
is. The south elevation looks at the back side of the library. The north elevation is the streetscape of Westminster. And I understand that there's a porch there on the front, or a screened-in porch. It's nothing like the residential homes on Westminster. Yes, it is a porch, but it is not a porch that's consistent with what's on that street currently. And I'd have to say, and perhaps others will agree with me, that the north elevation looks like the back side of the building, although I recognize it really is the east side that is the back of the building. The south elevation looks like more like a front, the way that that design is laid out, and yet that looks at the library. So I wonder about the possibility of having the north elevation look more like the south and vice versa. So that would be my first question, or my first request for consideration. The second would be, you've got a garage that faces, and I realize where it comes in from, but it's very close to Westminster. And I would expect that there would be lighting for that garage that's probably on most of the night, because you've got people coming and going into that garage, which services every single resident in that building. That's hard for the folks across the way at 360 Westminster to be looking at a light, which is necessary for safety, but I'm wondering how you're mitigating that with the, again, streetscape on Westminster. To me, there have been a number of things that you've done over the last several months to meet the standards. The part that I feel is most lacking is that north elevation. And I'm very sad that that has not received the same amount of attention as some of the other aspects of the project.
let me just respond
Okay.
to this. Is there any other question?
Nope, that's
Is that
it.
Okay, so, the one, so our entrance into, let me grab the right pen, here we go. So this is the ramp into the garage.
Right.
This is our ramp into building, phase one. Basically, there's a row of arborvitae across the street, which are pretty dense across here. So it's shielded by that. The other is that we have, on this garage, we have motion detectors that turn lights on downlights right in front of the garage.
Okay.
That work really well. The other thing is that we have residents that live right up above it. Actually, the hookers live there. So we're very concerned about the noise and all that to that. There are 6 units in this building. I can tell you that the garage door does not go up and down very much.
Okay.
So that the amount of traffic really created in this is very minimal for that. And we found that, so that light pollution or whatever is affected just as much here, and we sort of have a real live situation
Okay.
of that. In the other building, we have the same situation when that curved light that comes down on underneath, and that it's lit from recessed cans underneath the canopy. The door is back slightly, which really works pretty well in terms of containing the light within that hole. There is landscape on either side and trees on either side, which really do a great job of hiding that. I don't know if you had a chance to see that. I didn't point that out on our tour. It's even probably better hidden than that those existing ramps. The front elevation, I understand the concern about the front elevation. Really, what we're trying to do, I mean, the elevations are pretty much identical on either side, with the exception of a porch on the front. I think that, you know, we could study and see if not screening that porch made some sense in terms of that. You know, I think if that made people feel better about that elevation, and that you could see in there slightly, because I do think the screening probably does change that. You know, we are back pretty considerably from the street for that. This porch is out on the face. We're, you know, back quite a bit different from that. But I think the outdoor space that we're creating for those units is really important. So I think, you know, we could study and look at that porch element to make it the other pieces of the elements, the side piece, the two doors, you know, this has a terrace, but it has its screened-in porch that faces the street. This is facing that street. So
This has two, and that's the big issue, and it's really a very large part.
yeah, I mean,
that
either
elevation.
reducing the size of it, of that porch, or taking the screening out of it, you know, I think would be a possibility of
if you could
doing
just
that. I think, you know, other than that,
soften that up a little bit.
they're really identical elevations, you know, in terms of that, because really the two bays to the right of that elevation are 35 feet back, plus, you know, that's why I was showing the perspective of it,
Right.
which I think is what you see in real life, not obviously the projected elevation of that.
I would just be interested, I'm sure there's some neighbors here tonight, they probably have a perspective on that too, in terms of what that looks like from the street.
Any
And
other
from their
questions?
homes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other comment was, you know, it doesn't look like a residential porch.
No.
And I think that's true. This is a condo building, and it's, you know, I think we tried the solutions of having mansards over porches and trying to make it look like a residential, and it, in my opinion, it did not work. You know, it was trying to make something that wasn't. And so, you know, I think the context of the overall and its relationship is a stronger element.
It is consistent with all the other porches, I recognize that, but to me, there's just a sensitivity on the Westminster streetscape that ought to be maybe considered a little bit more, please.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Pettit.
Yes. When you enter off McKinley, you come straight down into a screen porch. When you enter off Westminster, you come straight into a screen porch. And both are sitting three-sided outside of the structure, really. The nice thing that you showed us on 705 was that screen porch was tucked in. It brought the light from, it would hide the light spillover from inside that unit. It created some angles, some shade, some relief to a long thing. So I personally feel that somehow getting those screen porches more towards the east side of the building, allowing more shade for the homes up there, articulating the building a little bit more might be beneficial. That's just my observation. I also feel that all visitor parking is in front of 723, 727, right?
It's all communal parking, so they can use the parking spaces there, plus the parking along.
That's
the edge
pretty
here.
much where your visitors would park, correct?
Yeah. And there's spaces across here, too.
Across where? Oh, I see.
And then, you know, along here, and then along
See.
down here.
I just don't see the flow taking it to those two entries, feeling like the front of a building that you're entering in from either direction.
They should be connected.
I think when
you
you
hear?
look at how 723, 727 has that nice deep articulation in the middle, it kind of defines the units, kind of defines, you know, if you were to tell people I'm in the middle or whatever, it's like a long expanse to really know. So in my opinion, there's not a lot of definition, as much definition between the units, entrance and that sort of thing, that there is on 723, 727, which I think is more successful. Now, did you say that there's no second floor balconies, but aren't there balconies over the, or terraces over the?
No, I'm saying there was no second floor balconies that look east.
Oh,
That are
okay.
east, yeah.
But
No,
there are
There
on
are
top of
terraces on
each
top,
of the-
correct.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
And again, I'm just thinking if I was sitting out on the terrace, I wouldn't want to see cars driving in, headlights at me into the screen porch or on the terrace, that sort of thing.
If you can see this, in the landscape plan, there's a considerable amount of landscape, you know, around that piece. And then the other comment that I had, I know we didn't look at the south elevation of the second building, which has a screened porch that is similar to these guys, where it steps out and is on three sides on that. So we just didn't see that elevation that faces the church, which is a very similar type situation there.
Yeah, I happen to think of screen porches and terraces and stuff as back of the house type things. So to me, they're on two of them, it's front of the house. So I have that observation. One of the other questions I had was a lot of first floor Juliet balconies in this building.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me some thought
and
process? There's
basically what-
more on first floor than there are on second floor.
Yeah, one of the things is that the grade drops off on the east side. Are we talking about on the east side? That and I think that we show a railing probably on this elevation that really doesn't need to have a railing on it, because you're actually at grade. Let me just go back.
Just a lot of doors opening in
All
along the whole.
One of the things that we like about that is that, hold on, let me just pull this up. So here we go. All right, so here we have the French doors that are out to the spaces is the light that creates in the interior too. So it has, you know, more light because the light comes down through.
But aren't they just going out to?
No, they're not accessible. I mean, but I'm just saying from the interior standpoint, so you have a light that starts at 8 feet high and goes down to the floor versus having it 8 feet high and then going to a sill at 6 foot. So there's more light that comes into the interior. So I'm not sure. So you're talking about, we have these two. These are actually egress stairs that go out. So that's a stairwell that comes out, and this is an egress stair that comes out. So that's an emergency exit for that. So we have one here on the east elevation. On the south elevation, these two come out to the terrace here on this side, and this one does too. And then on the north elevation, this comes out to the terrace. This one is out into landscape. On the east elevation, this one is out to the terrace. These two, I would say, we could look at changing those to be windows versus doors, because you know, I think the fence is going to pretty much cover that first floor level. So I think we could look at that. So
It appeared like a lot to me. And and I know that I'm not moving in, but I would hate to decorate around all those doors, so, it's just a comment, on that. Let me see what else I had. What is the, fencing, do you have fencing proposed for the east side? New fencing?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You have new fencing
New fencing.
proposed for the east
Correct.
side, and what is that? And
Yeah, we
what's
would
the
have
height?
stockade fencing, wood fencing, basically, that we show on the south side of our existing building. So that would be we're proposing it at 6 feet, but again, I think we have the ability to make it 7 feet. Earlier with the Donovans, when we were discussing that, they talked about a 7 feet. I think if 7 feet were more appropriate, we could change that to be a 7-foot fence as opposed to 6. 6 is just our code, and I think a 7-foot fence would probably make more sense in that.
Okay, and the rooftop decks, that would be split between the 3 second-floor owners, or however many second-floor owners?
Yeah,
is that
there
correct?
would be, correct, there would be individual spaces that are developed on the roof above each of the 3 units that are in the second.
And what kind of rules would there be for any types of additions that they would want to put out there, such as big planters or pergolas or whatever,
Well-
furniture, whatever? I just want to know that you're not going to have a mishmash of things going on on the roof level.
Well, very similar to what you saw up in the first 2 buildings. Typically, people put landscape planters in. They plant the edges of them. We don't have limitations in the bylaws in terms of what furniture they put on there. We do have limitations in pretty standard type condo documents, which limit you in terms of the visibilities of what you put on your terrace. It'd have the same
And
sort of thing.
capacities of people?
Well,
and
there's
how-
obviously a weight. There's a weight. We design them
sort
for
of thing?
100 pounds live load on those, so that they can have pretty decent sized planters, because that's a big component of that. People have live roofs up there, sedums, those sorts of things too, on those spaces. I mean, it's been.
I mean, I think that people would not want a lot of parties going on late in the night.
I can tell you, so we've occupied those spaces for over a year now, 2 years, I think, we're going on, and we really haven't had any issues. I mean, not any, I don't know that.
Not like my neighbors then.
I mean, it would be, people have a chance to enjoy the outside like people do in their backyard, of a similar thing.
Okay. So, just to sum up, I think the 2 screen-in porches could use a little more study, and I think that the building could use a little bit more articulation. It's so long, it's so, you look down there and you don't want it to look like, you have articulation on the other 2 buildings. And this one's even longer and no articulation.
I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I hear what you're saying. The 2 towers split up that elevation for that. The 2 entrance porticos that protrude out, the elements are different. So those are the same elements that are used on this. So I think if you examine if you look at this, so this is the elevation. So they have the same porticos that are enters. It has the entrance piece that's protruded out. the colonnades of the balustrade that goes across the top that's articulated, the other end piece that breaks the elevation into two. This piece steps down at the corner, this steps down at the corner. So there's quite a bit of articulation when you really study these elevations. We haven't looked at this lightly. We've have studied it considerably. So I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean. The other buildings are larger, and the entrance sequence is very similar in terms of the portico is the same. The way you enter through the building in terms of a front door and its surround is the same.
That's my comments.
Great, thank you. Questions? Commissioner Sperry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions of clarification for staff. And thanks for indulging me because we do have a new commissioner with us. Why, when City Council overrode this on April 5th, 6th, I think it was Easter Monday, with the tie-breaking vote cast by the mayor, why didn't this then return to plan? Because plans denied it twice, so I'm confused as to why it's now in front of us without Plan Commission's approval.
The city council did not vote to remand it to the Plan Commission. They had done that earlier. At the April meeting, the city council voted to approve the petition.
So was it approved, or did they just overrule the Plan Commission's rejection and then address it to us or remand it to us? It hasn't been approved, right? Because we haven't yet
The
weighed
city
in.
council has approved this petition.
So what's our role right now?
Your role is to look at the design aspects. Again, not unlike a subdivision where the Plan Commission will review it, the city council will review it, a plat will be recorded, the number of lots will be set, the setbacks will be set, the configuration of the lots will be set. A new house, if it was in the historic district, would come to you. If it's not, it would go to the Building Review Board.
Right, I guess what I'm saying, though, is Plan Commission still hasn't done their job, correct?
The city council, as you said, overturned the Plan Commission's recommendation. The Plan Commission is a recommending body to the city council. The city council voted to overturn their recommendation, and the city council approved the petition.
Okay, so, that being said, given that initially, when we had the Quinlan Carriage House, we approved the demolition back in 2016, we were told, as I recall, because I was looking through the minutes, that it was going to be replaced with 2 duplexes not to exceed 4 units. So, we're up to how many?
Wow, sorry.
No problem. So how many units do we have now, Mr. Whitmer?
We have approval between 6 and 8 units.
Okay, and when we denied your petition a year ago, January, and it was a 3-floor structure, what was the total square footage of the development at that time?
I believe it's approximately the same as what we have currently.
Which is?
It'd be about 24,000 square feet.
Okay. And what is the square footage now with the two?
It's approximately the same as.
Right, so it hasn't changed at all. It's just become wider.
Correct.
Instead of higher. And that was, you were able to do that because you acquired the home to the east and were able to annex the 35-foot parcel, correct? Is that
Correct.
right? Okay, just so I understand, what is the dimension of this lot? Half an acre? What is it?
The total square footage of the lot with the 35-foot as it now is configured. Do you know that number off the top of your head?
It's half an acre roughly, is that
I
correct?
think it's a little bit more than that, yeah.
An acre,
How much is it?
more than that.
I can look.
I'd have to look that up.
You don't know what the square footage of the lot is?
The square, I don't have it right handy at my disposal.
Okay, because my understanding is if a single-family house was built on this lot, I don't think it could exceed more than roughly 8,000 square feet. Does that sound about right?
I would assume that if you know that, yes.
Okay. So walk us through what's been changed to this petition since we last saw it in February of 2020. Meaning, I know you've taken off a floor, but you've also owned the fact that the square footage hasn't been reduced in the slightest. So help us understand what has been done.
I think if you pulled up that petition, the visuals of it are quite different. So what we had is a two-story building with different shaped roofs that were on top of it.
The mansard
There were
roofs,
three-story
right.
roofs, yes. So that has changed considerably. And we feel that the two-story solution is a much lower solution. Obviously, we've been able to acquire the property and get the proper zoning to allow that to happen. So those are the two things that we have changed since the last petition.
Right, and you now have a flat roof, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah,
In more matching, what we understood was the direction of the last meeting was to make the buildings more cohesive with the original two
Right,
phases of
and
the
then
project.
looking at the surrounding structures, you do agree that the majority of the structures are gabled, they're not flat.
No, I don't agree with that.
The only one that is flat, Peter, from what I understand, is the original Quinlan estate, which is immediately behind you and east of the library. Am I missing another structure?
Sure, our other two buildings, which are adjacent to the site.
Other two buildings are in BRB. Those are in the business district. This
That
is
is
the
part of the
historic
context for
district.
which the building should be evaluated. It doesn't distinguish an historic district. It says visually connected.
So you're basically admitting that your priority in this design is not residential or to be residentially compatible with the Westminster Streetscape. It's as an answer to phases 1 and 2, which face McKinley. Is that correct?
I think, our solution, and, I understand differences of opinions, I do. All of our other solutions with different roofing shapes and massings were very unsuccessful in terms of trying to mitigate it, or to come up with a visual connection. It made sense to us, and it still makes sense to us, that it be related to the other two buildings as an overall design element. So I think, we tried those solutions. We looked at different roofing pieces or different roofing shapes to fit onto our building. We didn't feel that they were successful.
Let's move on. On the roof, as far as the wheelhouses, or we're calling them penthouses, will those have the visible steel beams as seen in phases 1 and 2?
Trellises? Is that what you're talking about?
They look like
The
steel beams.
shading trellises. We haven't, they could have those trellises added to them, yes, they could.
Okay. In addition, are those where the elevator wheelhouses are being housed? The
Elevator
abutments,
wheelhouses.
or are they actual penthouses?
No, they're actually stairwells up to the third floor,
Did you just say third floor?
up to the roof level, yeah.
So there's a third floor on this residence.
What's that?
Did you just say there's a third floor on this residence?
Yeah, I did say that, I guess.
Okay, because I thought this was a
It's-
two-floor structure.
It's basically access to the roof through those penthouses.
Will there be patios out there?
Yes.
And grills?
You have the ability to have that, yes.
Potentially restrooms?
No, I wouldn't be able.
Plumbing?
You could have plumbing up there for a sink, outdoor sink or that sort of thing, yes.
I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Montagne, questions?
Yes, thank you. So I, for one, thank you for coming back and for heeding some of the comments that we had, right? Because I think when you were here in February, we were waving both sides of this card. And I do think that, quite frankly, your new petition mitigates quite a few things from what's in our purview as an HPC. So we're not here to question density or that, right? There's no building scale variance that's required and whatnot. That said, I do have a couple questions, only 4 questions. The kit of parts, because a lot of this is around, as the city staff had said, what is under our purview is really around a lot of the visual aspects of the design. So is the kit of parts that you've used on the first buildings identical to what you're using on these buildings?
Yes.
Okay, so therefore, I have no questions related to that. What about impervious surface, right? I think, we want to be sensitive to that, obviously, with the neighbors. Would you say that this proposal now that you've widened the building and made it a two-story building, have you reduced the amount of impervious surface on this property?
Because of the additional square footage of the other property, I'd probably say yes, if you take the additional space of the.
So you'll be able to mitigate water on this
We do-
property better with this proposal than your previous?
Yes, yeah. Not that we really, with a 15-foot setback on the east side, we're able to install the storm sewer through that, which allows us to collect the water a little bit better on that piece.
Have you considered moving the building even further south? I hear you with the look down the alley and the penthouse and whatnot, but really you're talking about green space that's between this building and the library property. Have you considered moving it further south?
Sure. We looked at that and studied that in many meetings with the planning and really in the approval of phase 2, we were mandated that we keep this line and this building would not go any further south. So that was established with the approval of phase 2 of this project.
So I think, my last question is really around, is related to, I think, what we've heard from a couple of the commissioners, namely Commissioner Grinnell. And it's really around the fact that this building, I think, is viewed by the public as being fronted on East Westminster. And when I think about the walk from McKinley into the historic district, because unfortunately, you're dealt a deck of cards in that this final building within the phase happens to be within the historic district. So you have a responsibility to help us live up to these 17 standards, and probably ultimately related to the property 373. So you own a bit of the streetscape on Westminster now, whether you like it or not. And we have a responsibility to act, within our purview. So when I think about this, and I think about the walk that goes, I'm walking from Westminster at McKinley Corner, and 333 East Westminster is what it is. I get it. It's within the BRB. That was done, right? The density, the proximity to the curb line and whatnot. However, when I do get to 351, I very much start to feel the historic district start to come alive, right? You start to feel very residential with what that building provides on Westminster. As you cross the drive, and I think that what you've done for I agree that the landscaping is very, very important within this property, and you guys have done an exceptional job. But when I do get to 715 McKinley, which arguably should have a Westminster address in my view, I do feel like your eye is immediately going to articulate, and you're going to be looking at the side of a 6-unit condominium building, which you're trying to put within here, and I get it, make it financially viable for you and Mr. Altunian, which makes perfect sense to me. But I would question if you've looked at other ways to make that feel a bit more residential in nature. So for example, that building, although it's 75 foot wide, you have done some level of articulation, right? Where you've stepped back the first part of the building. So now you're dealing with a 50-foot elevation. Could there be a bit more articulation that allows for you to have that be much more of a residential view? The eye doesn't go up to this, call it 34 foot at the cap level. I would argue you're never going to see the penthouses on this property. And just start to think about that and the rhythm as you start to move down the street. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll ask you all the same questions with the 373 property when you show up with that as well. So that's really where I want to focus. My question to you is, like you said, you've done multiple studies. We're looking at one proposal, which looks like the side of a condominium building. And I get it with the screen porch. And I would agree with you 100% that the previous, fanfare that everybody put you through in terms of mansards and making a 3-story building look like a 2-story building. Really, the consistency of what you've done with the kit parts, I think, is very successful. But my question to you is predominantly on that one elevation, that north elevation. And have you thought of some different things to make it more residential and more human-like in scale?
Sure. We're always open to look at the different, I think if we take the language, what we developed, if opening the porches up not having them screened and enclosed. If making it smaller by a bay makes it seem better, and you know, we're happy to look at those sort of options, and I think that those make sense, you know, to do that. You know, I think I don't think we're interested in looking at any kind of pitched roofs or anything that you know, which you just discussed, that doesn't make any sense to us. That, you know, we use the same sort of, what I would say, kit of parts to do that, and maybe this, you know, the scale of the terrace on that could be smaller, and you know, and I think that when I look at that, you know, I think that would be something we'd be happy to study in relationship with that. Yeah.
Well, questions?
All right, great, thank you. Just some other questions, and then I'll throw out some comments, and then we'll move forward. Do you think there's any room for gravel walkways on the property? And I ask that broadly.
You know,
I know there could be some maintenance issues and some other
you know,
things.
we put gravel or granular at the edge of the boxwood. Because we had all kinds of problems with that up at Regents Row and trying to get things to grow in that. You know, in terms of a walkway, because it's used year round, it really makes it difficult. And you know, so I think, you know, we found that we can maintain it in the areas that we have. I like the idea of it, but I think that the walk, you know, so where would you do that? The sidewalk that goes to the library, but you know, that's going to be a year-round kind of thing. Right. So that way, and you know, I don't think we want to put a gravel walk around the edge of the open space. Does that make much sense? You know, others just go out into the grass. So I like the idea of it, but I just don't know.
That's why I put it out there.
Yeah.
Is there any way to do it in some places practically, but I understand. You talked about a lot of plantings, new kind of screenings and so forth. The way it came across to me is that's a definite plan, so it's not a consideration. Is that correct?
Yeah.
In other words, you plan on doing that. That's in your proposal.
Absolutely, we plan on doing that. You know, and I think we've shown that in the first two phases that we've, you know, the development is consistent with that, and we will follow through with that.
Okay, great.
You know, the other thing is that I think, you know, the staff does a really good job of when we get this, and we should add a little something here, you know, tweak it and do that. And I think Mariani with Colleen in that we have the staff to do that and really plan on making that happen.
Okay, great. Because as I look at, regardless of any structure that would be there, as I look at a lot of the plantings along that fence, a lot of them are just not in very good shape.
No,
so I think anything that goes there would be
an improvement, no question. I mean, they're basically weed
so
trees that are in there, and they've grown up over time, and you know, all that really needs to be taken out.
Okay. And I hear there's questions relating to floors versus stories and everything else. In terms of where we were last time and where we are this time, what I care most about is basically what is the difference. And as I do the sloppy math, and I know that there are some sections that are a little bit higher, I think we had some of those last time, but it sounds to me as though the overall height reduction is around 25%.
Correct.
Is my math somewhat correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because 25% to me does not, that does not come across as an insignificant number to me. So I just wanted to confirm that. And then the other is, and a little bit of a comment, and Kathy, feel free to jump in. We all looked at all the commentary and looked at the concerns that a lot of people had, and I had a couple reactions to it. One is that to the degree that any of those comments speak to a standard, I internalize them, and it's our job to internalize them and ask questions and challenge you to say, can they be addressed? And that could be lighting concerns, noise concerns, anything else. And so I'm sympathetic to those, and I think people have brought those up. The ones that, and I don't like to use the word sympathetic, I empathize with the other comments that speak to things that people would like to have done. But I would just put this out in terms of managing expectations, because it'll come in my summary comments. That isn't our role. So, and you can speak to this, Kathy, But the fact of the matter is, if other bodies have made decisions before us, whether we agree with them or disagree with them, this isn't the Court of Appeals. So some of the comments that were looking to us to say, could you consider this and consider that, I would just have to say directly, the answer to that would be no, only because it isn't in our purview. We can't dance around our standards and come up with new rules to decide to go forward with something or not go forward with something. So I just put that out there so people understand that and hopefully can respect it. This is the agreement that has been made that we've been asked to review. Does not allow us to say, could you put up a home there? It's just not a relevant perspective for us. It's not our responsibility. So what I'm looking at, and the comments that I'll make towards the end will be very specific to that, to the standards, the requests that we made last time. Have changes been made that are significant enough that address those changes? And are you making reasonable and thoughtful accommodations to the key concerns that we raised against the 17 or against our standards? So that's what I look to, and I just wanted to put that out there for other people who might want us to kind of go beyond our purview, so to speak. And I just want to share that from my perspective, that's not our role. Kathy, I don't know if there's anything to throw into that, but that's my takeaway and my perspective on this, and I know we've had many discussions on it. So I think that nod is a yes.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, great. All right, thanks very much. So now we go to public testimony.
So you certainly may have people here that would like to
Yep.
testify. In the meantime, let me just give the number to anyone who may be watching
please
on
do.
the phone, on television. If you're at home and you wish to testify, the call-in number is 847-810-3689. We will put you on hold and we will bring you into the meeting at our earliest opportunity.
Great.
So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
So best to invite people here first?
Sure.
As we wait. Anyone here like to come and speak, please?
So good evening, Commissioners and
Good
Chairman
evening.
Grieve. I am Susan Atkinson and President of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. Joining me at the podium tonight is Marcy Kerr, our Executive Director. I had the privilege of serving on this body, on this commission for 6 years. In addition, I served for 6 years on the Building Review Board and most recently on the Plan Commission for 3 years. So,
Can you step up to the mic? Thanks.
sorry. Is that better?
No.
Yes, sir.
Just get a little bit
Better?
closer to it. Yeah,
Better?
that's better.
Okay. So anyways, I appreciate all your work on these petitions. I understand fully the kind of work you put into it, and I appreciate that. We are here tonight to present the Foundation's opinion on the appropriateness of the proposed condo building at 361 Westminster, known as Phase 3 of the McKinley Road development. We previously submitted our detailed opinion on Tuesday to the HPC and staff, which was compiled and written by our advocacy chair, Art Miller. I am here to summarize that letter and our concerns. So the Preservation Foundation's mission is to protect the historic visual character of Lake Forest. We find this petition does not meet many of the city's historic preservation standards due to its visual incompatibility to the neighboring single-family historic homes on Westminster, specifically when considering the standards for height, scale and mass, and style. So in terms of height, the petitioner specifies the proposed building will be 2 stories high. However, as pointed out, with the addition of outdoor living space and a 12-foot tall screened porch on the roof, the building will actually be 3 stories high of living space, which is incompatible with the 2 and 2.5 story single-family homes to the east, west, north, and south. The transition from a 3-story condo building to the residential homes to the east actually begins with a 2.5 story single-family home at 351 Westminster. If the proposed condo building has rooftop living space, it will disrupt this transition down to the residential homes, impose on the neighbor's privacy, and change the character of this quiet residential block and important entrance to the East Historic District. If this proposed building is to be truly a two-story building and be compatible with the surrounding homes, the third floor rooftop living space should be removed from the proposed plans. The petitioner could also consider a more residential roof style to be compatibly visually with the surrounding Westminster homes. In terms of scale and mass, this is a solid, massive, rectangular brick building that will dominate the smaller, lighter, more traditionally detailed residential homes on the block. It will be visually incompatible next to the historic single-family homes of Westminster and disrupt the residential streetscape and character forever. To reduce the appearance of scale and mass, the petitioner should follow the 2016 master plan suggestions and consider a different arrangement of the units into more residential-looking townhomes, duplex, or even a single-family home, all with front doors facing Westminster. In terms of style, this building will be on Westminster, not McKinley Road, and should relate visually to the single-family historic homes on Westminster. The proposed style relates to the two condo buildings on McKinley, but it is incompatible with the residential streetscape and character of Westminster. The proposed style should be refined to include more compatible, delicate, and traditional residential features of the surrounding homes. A Westminster-facing front door instead of a screened porch would help the structure look more residential and compatible also. A good example of a condo development that attempts to relate in style to its next-door residential neighborhood is the developer's own Regency Row, with its 2.5-story hipped-roof townhomes backing up to the residential neighborhood of Atteridge Road. A consulting architect specializing in traditional residential design may be appropriate here. We are willing to recommend such traditional architects to assist in design. Demolition and design of 373 Westminster. The HPC has always required that a replacement structure be proposed when requesting a demolition, as you had pointed out. The HPC should consider the demolition request for 373 Westminster, and a replacement structure should be proposed and reviewed at the same time to ensure a compatible home will be built. So in conclusion, the City of Lake Forest has been on the national forefront of developing ordinances to protect our community's historic character and to ensure new infill is compatible with existing neighborhoods. This commission, the BRB, and the Plan Commission have spent decades reviewing petitioners' building plans, considering the concerns of surrounding neighbors, and asking many families to compromise their home plans to meet our historic preservation standards. We respectfully ask that the HPC hold this petitioner to the same standard that thousands of homeowners have been held to by adhering to our city ordinances and process and addressing the neighbors and community concerns. This proposed new construction must meet the historic preservation ordinance standards and be, quote, visually compatible with properties, structures, sites, public ways, objects, and places to which it is visually related. We recommend a continuance on this petition to address the compatibility issues. We respectfully suggest the HPC form a subcommittee to review appropriate design options. Lake Forest Preservation Foundation is willing to participate in that process. We also ask the petitioner to fully engage the neighbors to address their concerns. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Rami Lopat. I hope the commission will indulge me if I run a minute long. Last Friday, you all received an 8-page analysis I wrote, but I wish to reiterate its main points tonight. It is premature for the HPC to see this petition at all. Before Condo 3 is reviewed, the HPC must first review, as Ms. Athenson just said, a new residence at 373 Westminster. The existing house cannot be demolished to accommodate a wider condo number 3 until the HPC reviews a replacement structure. 2, the condo number 3 project needs to be sent back to the Plan Commission so that it can finish its work. Plan never got to the point of reviewing any number of specifics, such as the maximum number of units allowed on this half acre. Mr. Whitmer included the alley in his lot size calculations. The city code formula specifically excludes public or private ways from maximum unit numbers. By my calculation, 4 units, not 8, are allowed on these half acre lots. The Plan Commission still needs to check the math. 3, Mr. Whitner claims his 40 by 70 foot public open space on the south is, quote, comparable to the greensward in Market Square, end quote. 2,800 square feet is not comparable to the 12,000 square feet, a half an acre of lawn in Market Square. Again, Plan still needs to check Mr. Whitmer's math. Despite the city council who didn't check the petition's content, these issues need resolution before the HPC tries to untangle this design for its compatibility with the HPC standards. That said, let's look at the standards. Can you figure out the style of this building? Me neither. But let's look at what the petitioner says about it. Mr. Whitmer says he made the design match his existing condos 1 and 2 at the suggestion of the HPC. That's revisionist history. The HPC told Mr. Whitmer not to combine Second Empire and Georgian, and that he should simplify the fenestration and the overall design. That was it. Okay, whatever. Mr. Whitmer chose to make Condo 3 match the existing condos 1 and 2. But what style are non-historic condos 1 and 2? Last year, Mr. Whitmer described them to the HPC as, quote, 1920s brick with some Art Deco elements, end quote. I do see the brick on condo number 3, but the 1920s Art Deco, no. So are they Georgian or something else? Mr. Whitmer's choice of style is an important HPC consideration because it directly relates to the HPC standard number 14, new construction. Standard 14 reads, in considering new construction, the Commission shall not impose the use of a single architectural style or period, but it may impose a requirement for consistency with the chosen style. The staff did not give you an analysis of this new construction for its consistency, whether it be Art Deco or Georgian. But Ms. Cerniak claims that Standard 14 is met because this style is transitional between apartments and single family. What makes this style transitional, according to the staff? The staff says it meets Standard 14 because it has, quote, residential elements such as front entries and screen porches. Are we honestly being told that this building is consistent or compatible with the neighborhood only because it has screen porches and front entries? Front entries? What building doesn't have a front door? Ironically, there is no front door on Westminster in this design. So the design also flunks Standards 11 and Standard 9. Once again, the staff report is skewed in favor of this petitioner and not in favor of the standards. Staff says the building, quote, appears to have a front elevation on the north, end quote. Please, show us a front entry on the north. This condo is a monolithic design of no historic style. This massive building does not belong in this historic neighborhood, and it meets none of the standards that I've been able to analyze. Please, deny again a certificate of appropriateness. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, my name is Susan Benjamin. I worked on the revision of the historic district, and I've been active looking at buildings in Lake Forest for. I've been active. I'm not close enough to the mic. Sorry about that. I've worked on the revision of the historic district, and I'm pretty familiar with the buildings in the district and the neighborhood and so forth. And I just wanted to make a few comments. Peter called me and he said, would I take a look at his plans? And I said, sure. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't have an opinion on what I think is happening. In terms of scale and materials in general to the district, it fits. I'm not, it's a different type of building. But that isn't what impressed me about the design that Peter put together. What impressed me were the way it does transition, and you can tweak some of the details, but the way it transitions to a residential neighborhood, everybody has discussed the fact that it's slower, and I said tweaking details is certainly in the cards. But what I really liked a lot is it reminded me of kind of a mews in England, where there are walkways. It's a little different from the abrupt change from the two condos on McKinley. And what I really liked a lot were the courtyards, were the paths, were the outdoor rooms, the transition of green space. And I think that they have worked pretty hard at coming up with a good landscape plan. Can it be tweaked? Sure. All along here, there are changes that can be made to accommodate changing an entrance or something like that. But the fact that the green spaces were so carefully thought out in terms of vistas, in terms of places to enjoy passive recreation, and to kind of begin to settle into the neighborhood to the east, and not an abrupt change from the two large buildings on McKinley. So that's why I entered in. I feel as though it's going a ways to doing the right thing, and especially the greenways and the landscaping plan and the paths and the way it creates like a mini village on the way to the bigger community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any callers, Kathy, or?
Oh, we've got some more.
Not at this moment.
Okay. Just didn't want to hold them on too long.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman Grieve. I'm Jeff Tarosian. I live at 401 East Westminster, which is 2 doors or soon to be next door to this development. Obviously, this commission knows how my wife and I feel, and probably a lot of the neighbors in this room, and a lot of neighbors who are not in this room, how we feel. The comparison to buildings 1 and 2 is completely uncalled for. Buildings 1 and 2 are just not in the historic district. That ends the discussion. You don't get to build a building in a non-historic way and then buy properties next door and encroach upon historic district properties and design it to something that's on a different street that is not historic. So buildings 1 and 2 really shouldn't enter in this conversation. And why this developer chose to marry the design of a Westminster streetscape to buildings 1 and 2 is really a mystery, because nobody asked him to do that. I will ask that you flip to the one page that the commissioner referenced, which had the north and south elevation. The idea that this is a 2-story building, and I know a lot of people have hit on this, is absolutely absurd. There is some revisionist history, too, on the developer actually reducing this structure from 3 stories to 2. Way back with the master plan, when the condos were envisioned behind 1 and 2, the plan was for that condo building on the city property to be 2 stories, or either to be townhomes like Regents Row or a condo building in 2 stories. And it was Commissioner Kerr on the Plan Commission who suggested approximately 2 or 3 years ago to the developer that the view from the train station of those condos should maybe be 3 stories, just so it adds a little oomph from the train station when you compare it to buildings 1 and 2, which are really 4 stories. That was the beginning of the 3-story conversation. Then it became an entire building of 3 stories. Then the developer did away with the single family on Westminster or townhome on Westminster idea and made it an entire condo building of 3 stories, and then has come back to you and says, I've really listened, I'm reducing it to 2 stories. It was never supposed to be 3 stories, ever. And it was the developer and Commissioner Kerr that suggested 3 stories, and now they're trying to reduce it to 2. But I will tell you, in 2 years when this is built, and I'm walking down Westminster with my then 4-year-old nephew, I will point to this building and say, hey, 4-year-old nephew, how many stories is this building? And he will say, that is a 3-story building. I don't care if you call that a penthouse. I don't know what penthouse just has a stairwell in it. I don't care if you call it a chimney. As the developer just said, the petitioner just said a few moments ago, chimneys rise above 2 stories, and you wouldn't call that a 3-story building. This is a structure that is almost on the entire width of Westminster Streetscape on the 3rd story of a building. And there's no knowledge that there's only a staircase in there. There are windows, 2 windows on the front. And if you look at all of the other elevations, each one of these little bump ups on the 3rd story has windows facing every direction. Facing east, facing west, facing south, facing north. This should be 2 stories. There should be no outdoor living space there. I'll also note the north elevation is by far the worst looking elevation. There's no symmetry. There are windows above windows and then another window on the side. There is a screen porch on one, but it's not centered. There is no symmetry to this design. And the idea that, oh, well, really the front of this property is the alley, which has literally 4 parking garages on it. 4 parking garages after this is built. That is really the focus of their design, is to make sure the alley with 4 parking garages looks good. I will tell you, I imagine when they built the Wenbaum Funeral Home, they didn't look to the back and say, you know, that's really a public street as well. We should make the back of the Wenbaum Funeral Home look better than the Westminster side. That makes absolutely no sense. This Westminster Streetscape is the whole game here, and that is by far the worst looking streetscape of this entire property. And that's what this commission is designed to analyze. That's why we're here. We wouldn't be here if this weren't in the historic district. And we're supposed to analyze it from how it looks from the most major street that it abuts. And this looks like a side yard, a backyard, with a porch, and with balconies. If you can indulge me another minute, because the mayor hung up on me the last time I tried to speak. There are 3 outdoor spaces here on the front. There's the screen porch, then there's a balcony above it, and then there's the rooftop deck. I don't know what the residents of these buildings are going to be like. I don't know if they're going to be 75-year-olds and spending 6 months in a day in Florida, and so it's not going to be an issue, or they could be college kids. I have no idea. But there could be big parties on each of those decks, and that is not what a streetscape in a residential area is supposed to have. There's no problem having a party on a patio. There's no problem having a party on a balcony, potentially in a backyard. But this is the front yard. This is the front yard. You can probably have 40 people on that rooftop deck, and then 20 people on the terrace below it, and then people in the screen porch. It's not appropriate. Lastly, and I'll sum up, the idea that this petition should go forward without a design of the house that is supposed to go on the other vacant part of 373 without a demolition permit, the idea that this should go forward without that design really is tough for the community to take, especially when the community was told 5 years ago that there would actually be a single-family home where they're trying to put condos now. So the idea that, oh, don't worry about it, we're going to put a single family next door, we've been down this road before. And so if they want approval for a condo building, and I know they have approval for a condo building, but if they want approval for a design, any design of a condo building, they must tell you what the design of that house next door should look like before they get the right to demolish. And I thank you for your time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sally Downey, and I live at 475 East Westminster. Why are we here tonight? The developers are here because they, in partnership with the city, see this as a continuance of their project 10 years in the making. HPC is here because of unintended consequences from the meeting in January 2020. The neighbors are here in person, by phone, and through letters because they are trying to ensure that whatever is built fits in with our beautiful historic neighborhood. The January 2020 HPC meeting, all of you reviewed a 3-story condominium. Building 3 that had passed through Plan Commission, however, with some concerns, passed through Plan Commission, but with some concerns about mass. The neighbors were at the plan meeting, and while we didn't love the final product, it did fit within the 2 city-owned properties. It was stepped back more from Westminster, and the decreased mass in front was acceptable. It was a compromise we could live with. When the 3-story design came before you, you also were concerned about mass and transitioning into the neighborhood, and indicated a desire for the architect-builder to have Condo 3 have a similar architectural compatibility to the 2 others on McKinley. Your direction to the developers, along with the neighbors' initial issue with mass, gave the developers the open door they needed to implement a 2019 plan that was already being discussed with the city. In 2019, the developers went to several neighbors to ask about expanding their building into the Donovan property. At the time, the developer was looking for more land to expand. It was not a solution to a major drainage problem or a solution to appease the neighbors and HPC by building a 2-story condo. Both of these are the reasons now being used to justify why they bought the Donovan property. In case you were wondering, the neighbors vehemently opposed the idea. The developers said they would drop it, and yet here we are. This newest plan before you is not a continuance of previously approved design. This is a brand new design in front of HPC that is now, with the city's vote to overturn the Plan Commission, is expanding into the residential historic district. HPC's argument for the design to move to more closely correlate to the 2 on McKinley is now a moot point because the building envelope has changed and the frontage has nearly doubled on Westminster. This is not a final piece of the 10-year development. This is a standalone condominium that is now residential in the historic residential district, which is also situated in an overlay district, which means that even more importance should be paid towards green space. I have no comments about the current design beyond nothing about it attempts to blend with our neighborhood. Take this design and try putting it anywhere in East Lake Forest and everyone would be up in arms. But this condo's proximity to town and mixed zoning makes it somehow permissible to overlook that it now resides in our historic neighborhood. It is not, as Plan Commissioner Rosemary Kerr said, just a 38-foot sliver of land in the historic district. HPC is the guardian of this district. You are the gatekeepers who hold all of us who live here to the same standards. When I proposed tearing down an abandoned house down the street on Westminster, I was not allowed to without showing your committee a replacement structure and a full landscape plan. The house had broken glass, unlocked doors, and raccoons living in it, but it was not considered to be an attractive nuisance or dangerous enough to tear it down right away, unlike the city's argument for tearing down the History Center with no replacement structure. I had to plant 80% of the landscaping before I was given occupancy as well. I followed the rules. Your committee has done a wonderful job of holding the swift development to high standards as well. So I ask you to make the developers do the same. They're very close to tearing down the Donovan property, yet there is no replacement structure for the remaining land not being used by the condo. They should not be allowed to move forward with the teardown without a complete plan for what is happening on the entire property. I ask the neighbors ask that you analyze this condo with the lens that it is a new structure in the neighborhood. Does it fit in architecturally? Does it transition well into the historic homes that will be sited next to and across from it? Does it give enough attention to green space, which is what is expected of homes in an overlay district? The developer and city continually highlight the green space to the south of Condo 3 and the benefit to the library, but this new condo design is on Westminster and should also be looked at in terms of how it transitions architecturally and in terms of landscape. Does a third floor space, yes, there is an enclosed third floor living space, act as a residential space, or is it entertaining space for the building? Will we see barbecue grills and patio furniture sitting outside facing Westminster or up above on the third floor like you do on McKinley? Drive down Westminster and see if any houses do. The answer is no. None of the neighbors have said you can never build, but all of us have said make it fit into our neighborhood. You can tell we are frustrated by this process. Living in this neighborhood is incredible, and with it comes a commitment from us to steward our houses as well. Building in this neighborhood is an honor. It is not a given. Any of us who wants to build in historic areas, we all know the rules and we have to follow the guidelines. This condo cannot and should not continue to be an exception. In 2019, when the developers first looked at knocking down the Donovan house and expanding the condo into the lot, the developers knew they were entering into a hollowed historic space, but that did not stop them. In fact, it continues not to stop them since, by their own admission, they have offered to buy another neighbor's house. Please help us keep this a two-story only condominium that transitions into our neighborhood, fits into our neighborhood, and enhances our neighborhood. As currently designed, it does none of those things. One more thing, I really appreciate the walkthrough, but that's indicative of what the problem is. It stopped as we hit Westminster. We never walked around to see how we, who live there, see this project, and I think that's a mistake. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Reed Daly, 385. On the house that bumps up to this one, do you mind swinging to slide, 91 from the PowerPoint deck? There's a colored version. Where's that one? Oh, sorry, I screwed up here. Let me not break your computer.
Yeah, I don't have the colored one in the presentation.
Cool. Can I zoom or not? Is it a touch? Is it an iPad or not?
Yeah, it will be.
Okay. Ah, shoot, I screwed you up again. Oh, it's Keynote? Sorry. Let's play it. Okay. So let's look at the bottom one. So I'm just, this is my view from the, I just want you guys to indulge me a little bit. This is my view from my property. On the first 2 floors, there are 36 windows that will face my house. And then on the 3rd floor, there are another 3. So I'm just a little concerned on light exposure, TV exposure. Right now, when I look, I see a lot of flat screens. It's really bright, and we're really far away. The second thing, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the distance from that 36 windows to my property. Do you guys know that distance by chance?
15 feet.
15 feet, okay, cool. So, sorry, I just brought a ruler. Sorry, I didn't know how this would work, if it would be. So, all right, so imagine 36 windows that close to your property if you had not. And when we bought our house, I was thrilled because there was a historic district building. And then we were told there might be some townhouses, possibly. I can deal with some townhouses. But 36 windows? That's a lot. And I know right now my green space and my trees are pretty bad. Sorry, I'm working to buy new trees, but in the winter time, you know, they're not covering. So I see all the windows, and now I'm gonna see 36 more windows. It's just disheartening as a homeowner, a new homeowner to this town. I'm also a little concerned on like music and what I hear. I'm already hearing stuff from those buildings. Like, who's gonna live in these? What's it gonna be like? I don't know. It's gonna be folks that are quiet, maybe. Are we gonna have patios and parties? Possibly. Water running up there. You know, I used to own a condo. Guess what? I went out in my patio a lot. I loved it. I'd be up on the 3rd floor all the time. So, you know, I just ask that you guys consider a little bit of a step down from an apartment building, sorry, condo, to something that looks like residence. Townhouses. Yes. Anything. I mean, this is crazy. And not only that, but my family's in bad shape now. We're not going to be able to sell our house. When you think about the way that this is now wrapping around the Donovan property, I haven't seen another home. I'm guessing there may or may not be a home there. But who's going to ever, if I ever wanted to leave this town, I'm never going to sell the house. Who's going to say, oh, we want to buy the house that's wrapped around a condo? Come on, I'm here, and my property value is going to go down by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And
well, they have phase 4 waiting for you.
Yeah. And you know, the shadows, it's gonna get real dark on me. You know, I lived in New York City. I know what that's like. It's depressing. I was thrilled to buy a house that had great greenery. It was private and secluded. So all I would ask is, on your next site visit, come to my backyard. I promise you there's a couple dead looking trees. I'm working on it. But I would love for you guys to see just how it looks from my property to the existing buildings, and then let's do some taping or measuring of how high it's going to be, because I'm going to guess it's going to be higher than the ceilings here, and then how far off it's going to be from my property, and let's see how folks feel about that, because it's really disheartening for me and my family. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Tarosian, and I'm actually reading a statement from Mike and Leslie Lardino, who are Leslie's home in Ireland visiting family, and Mike is a pilot. He's flying. So they sent me this. I hope that's okay that I can read this on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Well, I don't have Leslie's Irish lilt, but hopefully I'll get the message across. I am sorry that we can't attend personally tonight. Mike and Leslie Lardino reside at 351 East Westminster and have been here for about 7 years. More than half of that time has been during construction of the new condo buildings, which have gone up on McKinley. Our 8 and 9-year-old children don't remember there not being construction behind our house, or the once green grass where the old Lake Forest History Center once was. It has been a storage area for construction vehicles and equipment for years now. We have been dealing with the disruption, filth, noise, and general aggravation for about 4 years. I mention this because although it means a couple more years of disruption to our lives, dirt in the house, children sneezing from dust, etc., we aren't opposed to the land being developed in a tasteful and appropriate manner. We are concerned, however, that the mass of the newly proposed building is too large, and also that the driveway for this building will be directly off our back deck. We're talking a matter of 25 feet or so away from our deck, and there is no talk about that or trying to hide it with new trees or bushes. We work hard to maintain our home, which we are proud of. Without properly thought out and developed condo buildings, we worry that we will be completely boxed in and left with a reduction in sunlight as well as the large increase in noise from the proximity of the driveway on the alleyway. We also had her talk about consideration of the streetscape being improved to include consideration of taking down the large telephone poles, electricity poles, and having the lines buried. We believe that would help considerably, but this seems to have been kicked down the road. We have never been approached by anyone from the city to look at impacts to our quality of life, or more importantly, that of our children. In fact, many of the drawings we have seen throughout the planning of this project have left our house entirely off the drawing. Out of sight, out of mind, we are still here. We have spoken to the developer when we have raised concerns about all of the trash we have often in our yard. Workers' cars parked outside our house before 7 a.m., including on Saturdays. The massive amount of dirt and dust on the road by our house, both Westminster and the alleyway, and the absolute filth and dust always on our front porch and back deck from the construction site. Sadly, although the developer generally seems helpful and genuinely receptive, which we're appreciative of, many of these issues are out of his control, and they keep happening nonetheless. Again, we just want to make our viewpoint and voices heard, as it seems like we are being, or have been, swept under the rug, even though we are clearly one of the most affected families, property owners, when it comes to this project. Lastly, I want to reiterate, we aren't against development, but we feel like we will likely be worse off after development than we were before. Please consider our family and home and take our viewpoint into consideration. Thank you, Leslie and Mike Lardino. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Apparently no callers, and anyone else? All right. Mr. Whitmer, do you want to speak to anything that's been brought up?
Well, one is, I'd just like to say, I do appreciate everybody's comments. I kind of don't appreciate some of the personal attacks on me, and I don't think it's appropriate, but I am trying to do the best job I can, and I think your job is to do your job with the 17 standards and review this project based on that. I think the standards are clear in terms of how we've evaluated them, and you should evaluate them. We have always been in a position to make modifications, and we continually do that process through all of our meetings, and we will continue to do that moving forward. That being said, a lot of the time it's just not constructive in terms of how we can come up with solutions, and I'm sure that we'll come up with one that obviously that won't be satisfactory to everybody, but meets the standards and fits within the community. You know, I'm disappointed that we can't make everybody happy because, you know, I think that would be the best solution. But in this instance, I don't think that that's going to be possible to do based on the information that I hear.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Comes back to us for deliberation then. Commissioner Clementine, you want to start us off?
Oh boy, thanks. Thanks for drawing the short straw to start this up. You know, I think there's a lot going on here, as we all know. And, you know, first and foremost, I really think that we've kind of keep pushing back, and I keep raising this for a reason, right? Our purview is around the 17 standards. Not here to argue about density and building scale variances and whatnot. It's all, I get the frustration, but we're not the place to sort of put that forward, I think would be my comments. That said, I can tell you that I'm not there when I look at these standards. I'm feeling better about some, but you know, there's some that really kind of ring and in my mind since the first proposal here earlier this evening, namely standard 11, you know, directional expression of front elevation, and you know, standard number 9. And one of the things that really rung with me with the public testimony, which quite frankly was helpful, and it puts a balance in terms of the petitioner's presentation. While I think there's been great attempts that have made, something that Ms. Downey said really kind of stuck with me. which was the fact that we should have started on Westminster. Because when I think about the overall purview that we have within this overall historic district, it's within that north elevation. You know, do I love that a butter has to look at 36 windows, or the west elevation mimics that of when you're within the property? I'm less worried about, quite frankly, what's happening when you're on the property. I'm very much hung up on that north elevation. And I started to think to myself, if someone was to come in 10 years from now when we're not here on this commission and redraw the lines of the historic district, I actually think they would redraw it around this building with the way that it's currently designed on Westminster. And with that, I feel like I have a responsibility to the city of Lake Forest, and as part of my responsibility on this, to not support this proposal based on, quite frankly, that very limited piece of the scale and the design of the Westminster facing side of the building. The other thing, and then I'll stop, is that's really sticking with me is I do think that it's one thing to write the check and check off the box on the 373 property to take a 38-foot swath of land. But I do think that, like all other properties in the city of Lake Forest, and maybe there's some legalities to how this is written, the demolition of that property, as well as the proposal of the new residence, because that has to happen in order for us to, like, I can't vote in favor of this property without that information in front of me. And I do feel like that's a key part of it. And with that, whether it's a continuance or, because I do think from a design perspective, there are tweaks that can be made. I think that the petitioners have made some good attempts with this, and working with city staff, or whether it's a subcommittee or whatnot, I do think that we can ultimately get there. We're never going to all be happy, as Mr. Whitmer said. We're never going to be happy with the overall height of the building. We're never going to be happy with the density and the massing on the property, right? I do think from a design perspective, and a lot of the purviews that we, again, have to really be responsible for and be held accountable for, we need lots of tweaks and lots of work in that aspect. So,
great. Thank you, Commissioner Sperry.
I'm going to defer. I'm still percolating.
Okay,
If you could just
perfect.
move on things.
I too, when I went to see the site for the first time over the weekend, went to Westminster. That's where I entered it. That's where I started walking. That was my walk to the library. I used to live 2 blocks away. I'd walk that whole walk to the library. And when I stood with the elevations in front of me, I didn't see something that I felt expressed the character of that neighborhood. I don't know all the history, as many of these people do, but I was disappointed with the image that I saw in that entrance from the north side. And so I'm not to the point where I feel that this is the right solution yet.
Great. Thank you. On to you, Commissioner Goodell.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, just work around.
Looking at the standards, which of course we've been asked to respond to, and I'm doing my best to focus on those and those alone. Standard 6, the rhythm of entrance porches. I think, again, we have a problem with the Westminster side of the building. There are porches, yes, there is no front door, we've discussed that, but it's a pretty big mess. Standard 11, directional expression of the front elevation. The report here says that the building visually appears to have two front elevations, west and north facing. And that, again, the directional expression, there is no entrance there, so I have a serious problem with that. I believe that standard is not met. And then standard number 14 on our sheet here, it's called new construction, shall not impose a requirement. In this staff report, it does say compatibility, and it says the transitional nature of the site requires some balance between the density area to the west and the single-family residential area to the east. I feel that standard is not met, particularly with respect to Westminster. And as a result, I cannot support this as it stands.
Okay. Commissioner Levitsky.
Thank you. I was moved by the neighbors. If it happened to me, I probably would have been up there with them as well. However, in my opinion, given the limitations of our purview as delineated by Kathy, I feel I must support the petition. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Gibson.
I have a little more detailed. When I open a packet on Friday evening, when the packets come, I'm always excited about what I'm going to see. Is it a new addition? Is it a renovation? New construction? You know, what is it? Because often I don't know what the petition or what petitions are going to be in there. We are the Commission of Aesthetics. We really deal with the look and the feel and the beauty and whether it fits, the compatibility, all the aspects of how this works in the historic district. And we're changing the historic district a bit, and there will always be changes in some form. And this kind of eats around the edge because we're right at the edge of a historic district, but Westminster is really the entrance to that. And that's how I saw this structure initially. And I think I said that some states out east have two facades. They have two fronts, and both fronts have to be equal in terms of the quality of everything. So that means that Westminster side should have a front door. And actually, Miss Sally Downey mentioned that actually she talked about the front in her letter. And of course, we've all talked about this evening. The city council came back just recently and said, well, let the HPC resolve this. Which I'm sitting watching this thinking, horrors, okay, what have I gotten into? This is difficult to resolve. And it's probably because initially, who knows, there was going to be 3 buildings, there was going to be a coordination of things. And actually, when I think about it, I took the train downtown for many years. I walked and biked to the train station. And when I walked into that train station, a wonderful train station, it hadn't been renovated yet, but where were my eyes? I was looking at Market Square. I mean, we had the prettiest Market Square in the country in 1917. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's beautiful. That's where I was focused. When I got off the train, I would be looking back at Market Square again, and that's where the focus was. This development, even though the 2 buildings are dealing with the Building Review Board, the Phase 1 and 2, also look toward Market Square. But that street that go between the 2 buildings, that's lost. I mean, I'm sure would be fine having whatever back there, but the front facade that actually is facing west, this is Phase 3, it faces west to the back end of a building. I really don't know of any other building we have in town or even in Chicago where you have a front facade that faces the back end of a building. I just don't know. There probably are some. What everybody's going to be seeing is not that east, or it's not that west facade. They're going to be seeing Westminster. And that's the part that all of us have really been talking about. what are we going to see? Commissioner Pettit talked about, hey, what are they going to see? A screen porch, both ends, okay. Each one of us has said something about it. And I said, I think initially, why can't you put a front door on there? Why don't you have an inviting front door of maybe the same type, even though who knows what kind of front door it's going to be? Is this a Georgian building? Is it federal? I mean, what do we really have here? Speaking of the standards, okay, standard 2, I look at this, and this is the width. And I see a setback. Okay, we have a setback, so it's 75 feet. The people are really going to see as they drive, bike, and walk past the Westminster. It's 75 feet. It's a lot bigger than the other widths. So standard 2 to me is out of alignment. One of the aldermen said at the last city council meeting, it's as if somebody stepped on this building from 3 stories and took it down to 2 and squished it out. So it's still the same as Commissioner Sperry found out, still the same footage. So we really we haven't resolved a lot of things yet. The height, standard 1, this is a non-starter with me about having a penthouse structure in a historic district. We had a single-family house in King Muir that it was on King Muir, and I know it's a single-family house, but they wanted a master bedroom. We specifically said, it was only 1 story, we said they wanted a door going to the top of that floor outside, and we said that's to clean it off. And we said, you cannot sit out there, no furniture. Okay, that's not to be used for that because you have neighbors nearby. This is even worse because people will be up there, who knows what, music, whatever. When you live in an urban building, and I lived in 25 years, I lived in Chicago and more urban looking things. And if you want to go outside, you have a park. You have city parks all over. You use those parks. So here, that penthouse structure, at least in the historic district, I think should not be allowed. It needs to be removed. It's intrusive. People right next to it as they walk might not see it because it's back a bit. But I tell you, I bet the people from the other side of the street can see it, who live across the street. It's visible in some way. And actually, if I lived there, I wouldn't want people to be looking down on me as I'm cooking, grilling, or doing whatever, washing the car or something. So that part of it, the height is still there, and that's standard 1. I agree with the standard 11, that expression of front elevation, and I consider Westminster that front, a form of front. I don't really think a porch should be there. I really don't. That maybe put a walkway in, put something, but make it look more residential. Make it appeal to the beautiful homes on that street all the way down. Let's see, what else? I'm concerned about the demo of 373. I agree that that's why I asked staff about this in terms of clarifying things, because the demo has to have something to do, that the structure that's going to be there has to have something to do with the building that's going to be put in there. I don't think the residents are unhappy about, as I said, the NIMBY problem. I think they want something really good looking in that area, but it's not coming together. Fenestration, and I'll just be specific, and I'm sorry to do this. I actually had asked Kathy to put this on the computer, and she agreed. But there are panels that are of the brick panels that have a lot of schmear on them, and they're not defined well, I think. And whether this is a Georgian building or whatever, I just came back from Charleston, the capital of, old Georgian out there, and I didn't see anything like this. I didn't see anything that looked homemade like this, the homemade bricks. I think it has to be defined. We don't want a structure in our historic district that is not, I want to say it should be perfect. It should be really really appealing. And that is not, to me, appealing. I think it looks like we need a new mason to do this. So those are the problems that I'm seeing. I think we need to take a better look, have the architect go back and redo things so that it works. The massing is big. It needs, whether it's down to 4 units, that makes sense. I mean, 2 people have talked about that in terms of that might be the key. Maybe the petitioner is willing to deal with this. So I would say I have a real problem with it.
Right.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge Peter Whitmer. Peter, I know that you've been through it, and you've been before us on multiple occasions for years now. So I don't want you to ever feel personally attacked by anybody. I will ensure that we all stick to the standards, because this is has nothing to do with you personally. All right, with that being said, I think that on a holistic matter, we need to see 373 Westminster's replacement, as well as review a certificate of demolition. Obviously, this building can't be constructed unless there is a construction staging area, which I assume would be 373 Westminster after it's demolished. And I think the relationship between that single-family home and this structure is critical. And as a community, and for all of my neighbors in the Westminster corridor, I think they deserve that as well. So I'd like that to be out there. Number 2, the 35 or 38-foot parcel, which was annexed by the City Council overruling the Plan Commission. I have heard both a City Council alderman as well as a member of the Plan Commission refer to this as a sliver of land. They also have indicated a basic misunderstanding that this lot is in the historic preservation district. This is not just a sliver of land that we're ruling on. If it were just a sliver of land, it wouldn't be before us today. It's for the entire half-acre parcel. And I am appealing to those on City Council that are listening and watching today to know this and ingest this, because I think there's been a misperception and a miscommunication there. On the standards, I am seeing 1, 5, 8, 10, and 11 still needing refinement. Standard 1, height. Mr. Whitmer has admitted there are penthouses on this structure. We were told this was a true 2-story structure. Structures that have living space or penthouses on a 3rd floor are not 2-story structures. Let's not finesse this. Let's not wordsmith. Let's just say what it is. It's a 2.5 or a 3-story structure. We know that neighbors do not deserve to have living spaces, ranges, grills, patios, stories above single-family residences. It's just common sense that this building should not articulate what's currently in phases 1 and 2 facing McKinley, which is not a residential area. So that's standard 1. Standard 5 is, let me just take a look at this real quickly, rhythm of spacing and structures on the street. This addresses the relationship of the structure that must be visibly compatible with property, structure, sites, to which it's visibly related. We don't know what this is. I don't know if it's Georgian. I don't know if it's Art Deco, 1920s. Now it's flat roofed, as I've shared, and Mr. Whitmer has confirmed, it really relates with that flat roof to the other 2 structures, not to the overwhelmingly gable, diminutive, delicate residential structures that are all in and around this beautiful historic gateway that we call Westminster. Standard 8, roof shapes. Again, it's a flat roof structure. I don't want to belabor that point. Standard 10. The scale, oh, guys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, 24,000 square feet on a half-acre lot. I beg of you, may we please reconsider the scaling and massing of this structure. It isn't and shouldn't relate to 1 and 2, which again were approved by a whole nother body because they are not in the historic overlay. And finally, standard 11, which has been belabored, but the front elevation. I know it's called 715 McKinley, but it faces Westminster. It faces Westminster. So let's have the facade that faces Westminster look like the front facade of the building. For these reasons, I hope we've all articulated, and I certainly agree with my fellow commissioners, that I am not in support of this petition as stated. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, let me try and summarize a little bit here. No surprise, this is a challenge. Where I struggle, though, might be a little bit different from my fellow commissioners, in that I look at this strictly against the standards, as I've said, and basically the petitioner is bringing forth plans consistent with what they have been given approval to do. So I struggle because I may think that 24,000 square feet is too big. The fact of the matter is, it did not come to me with requesting a variance. I haven't been asked to review that, so I don't have to approve a variance because another body already decided that. So that's a challenge that I have, in that if I just look at the standards and want to speak to the standards, I also hear a lot of discussion and debate about things that were decided outside of this group. And so where I really find difficulty is it's very hard for me to understand what direction we could ever provide. That if we gave a continuation, I don't understand how it could ever come back against what Mr. Whitmer and the developers have been given permission to do, that somehow we wouldn't push back on. So that's my greatest concern, that we just spin them around. But in a sense, what we're arguing with is some agreements that were made outside of our group. So the best I can do is, in summary, I'm certainly not hearing support for it. I didn't get my strongest sense as to whether or not my fellow commissioners want a continuation with specifics. That'll just have to come out in the motion. So I can only go on the record and say, from my standpoint, at least in terms of where we were before, where we had issues, and where the city and other bodies have said that this is what's allowed to be there, whether I agree with it or disagree with it, when I look at it, I believe that with some changes that could be made against the structure that's there, that we could provide that specific counsel, and Peter and company would be able to work through those revisions, and they would be palatable, and they would come back. And at least in my estimation, I would find them acceptable. In other words, I believe that there's an acceptable solution. Again, my concern is some of the comments suggest that we go back to the drawing board. I think we've gone down that path before. So to suggest go back and look at townhouses and mansard roofs, or show me Art Deco or Victorian or whatever, I'm hard pressed to believe that any of those just would open up a whole nother round of controversy, and somebody doesn't like that style, or I don't like that kind of Victorian, or they're too close together. But at the end of the day, they will still have proper setbacks. They'll still be close to neighboring properties. They will have living situations, and if they want to have a party in the backyard, they can do that. There are all sorts of things, hypotheticals, that could exist. I can't think of anything that could ever be built that wouldn't provide some of those things that could be problematic for the surrounding neighbors. But I think from a design standpoint and aesthetics, especially on the northern part in Westminster, I think those were very thoughtful and fair comments. But I also believe that they could be accommodated without this being a major redo by any means. So with that, those are my comments, and I can only put it up for a motion.
Any thoughts on 373?
Well,
Chairman?
well, I'm torn on that one only because it sounds as though everybody just wants to know what the facts are on that, and they're uncomfortable. But I also know that we have approved a demolition without seeing a replacement structure before.
And that's why we're here right now. And
But I'm just saying, we've done it.
Right, it was Pandora's box. That's
But that's my point, and so I can't weigh in on that only because we weren't asked to vote this evening on a demolition.
No.
But there is a question.
Well, I'm, in addition, if we could deliberate on this.
Yes.
You know, Commissioner Pettit brought up the whole idea of the concept of that, the end unit at the south end with the, you know, with the screen porch and all of that, in terms of that being a problematic thing. And so it's not just the north end that's the problem. There are problems all the way through this. And I have a problem with the brickwork or the masonry or whatever. There are lots of steps in here that we have really discussed that have really not much to do with the huge massing or the, you know, the things that other people have decided for us. So maybe if we denied this, they could go back and redo all of these things.
Well, that would be a continuation. See, no, that's where what you're saying is in agreement with what I'm saying. I can be supportive of a continuation. Providing some guidance on some things that are refinements.
Okay.
But I don't want to support a continuance if the idea is somehow it's going to be this, we're requesting this massive redo. In other words, some refinements to brickwork, some change to the facing on Westminster, and some other things. And then it's up to the petitioner to decide whether or not I want to go down that path or not. I'm just saying, I want everybody to understand that if I were to support it, I believe that the suggestions that have been made can be accommodated without the entire structure being rethought. Entirely new footprint, new roof, new window structures. That to me is so far of a redo, and my sense is it's not in anybody's best interest because it'll come back, and I think we could have 55 different opinions on that.
Can we hear from some other commissioners?
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
I'm,
Steve.
I'm for one, I'm in the same camp as you on the continuation, but I still think that as a commission, we need to understand clarity on the 373 property.
Yeah.
Because if there is in
and
fact.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, if there
with
is
the continuation in the motion,
yeah.
that we would need to understand that. Absolutely.
And I say that, Chairman, because I think we need to show goodwill and grace toward the neighborhood. They've been through a lot, and I think we need to get our arms around this uncertainty and not continue this path of now what, which we heard from a number of the folks in the community.
I don't even think it's something to be debated. If there's a demolition permit that's expired,
it
then
has expired.
something needs to come back before this commission. So make it part of the continuation, and let's check off those boxes, including a conceptual proposed
agreed
new building, so we can understand the relationship down Westminster on how all of these structures interrelate.
And the
namely-
streetscape.
And the streetscape.
Absolutely.
namely
So I think that
standard
should be
11.
part of the continuance if we're going to move in that direction, but I want to hear from Rob.
Anyone else? Commissioner Pettit, anything to add?
I'm in full agreement with my fellow commissioners. I think if we're going to continue, that we need to have answers to all of those questions that we have, you know, out on the table still. And I can't remember the number off my head, but the next door property is one of those. So I would want that as a part of a continuance.
Any further discussion?
I'm for what the others have said. I think a continuance makes sense.
All right.
So how do we?
Someone want to try a
Well,
motion?
How do we articulate this?
Well, you can move to continue.
Right.
I think though, wait, before we do that, before we put it as a motion,
Say again.
I think that, do we want to specify the areas that need to be discussed? And I would put the penthouse business on that too. I think that it's a real critical thing that is going on.
Which would fall under,
It's height.
under number one, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've captured, I think,
Do you have the?
from many of the
do you have
commissioners,
the-
the
you wanna-
different,
You have 1, 5, 8, 10,
Yeah.
11.
yeah, 1, 5, 8, 9.
Maybe, Steve, you want to maybe use
Do you want to
those?
take a stab at it?
Let's see. second here. Try and get it right, it's important here. So Kathy, help me out a little bit here on the continuation piece, because it's joined up with conceptual approval.
No.
You
Are we-
could
are we
simply
granting?
make a motion to continue, but to Chairman Greaves' point, to be real specific, and there were a couple issues that I heard the majority of the commission ask for, and then there were many other issues that, again, seemed to stray from, I mean, specifically,
So do we just stick with the standards?
specifically, I heard requests to look at the scale and design of the Westminster facing elevation.
Right.
And look to
Residential.
several of the standards.
Yep.
And then I specifically heard a request for us to look into the demolition just from a legal standpoint and understand at least a conceptual plan for 373 Westminster. Those are the two items that I heard consistently from all of the commissioners.
Well, and the penthouse and the height was brought up repeatedly, the third floor living space.
I would just say articulate very clearly exactly what you're expecting, because Chairman, as you said, to think that this is going to come back to you in a completely different configuration is simply a waste of your time, a waste of the neighbor's time, and certainly a waste of the developer's time. So if it sounds like at least several of the commissioners believe that there is a way forward on this. I would again say, if you don't think there's a way forward on this, don't vote to continue. Vote to deny and let it play out.
But
But
just to be-
I believe I heard a majority
two.
of the commission saying there's a reasonable way forward with some modifications and some additional information.
Got it, okay. So I move to grant for a continuation for the certificate of appropriateness for the third condominium building proposed on the south side of Westminster, with specific attention to HPC standards 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, 11, and 14.
We put 10 in there
In-
too, and scale.
And 10.
Sorry?
10 is scale.
Scale.
Structure.
And 10. Included in the continuation would be the consideration for the proposal for the demolition for 373 Westminster, and conceptual design for the replacement property at that site.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Well, are you
Aye.
gonna do a roll call, or do you want us to just?
No, we can,
Okay.
since we're here, we can do it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Or Ron, if we could.
Mr. Levitsky? Ron?
Aye.
All right.
We're
So moved.
unanimous. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Gosh, I hope somebody
Oh, my
can.
God. Good luck.
Give us a week.
We got it on tape. It's televised. It was a unanimous vote.
A continuation.
Do you want to draw us to a close, or?
Well, I have to ask, Jennifer, any other business?
No, I guess just as a reminder, there are a few items already scheduled for the end of June. That meeting date is June 23rd.
Okay. Great, all right. So with
And
that-
we will be polling the commission for a special meeting. I believe we already have 5 items on that agenda. We will be carrying this one over, so we will look at the other meeting calendar, see if there is a free night, and we will send an email out tomorrow with some options for dates.
Will virtual still be an option?
My sense is we probably want to be in person.
All right, with that, motion to adjourn? So moved. So moved, all right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.